Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WIC TV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And today, we are going to be talking about relationships, and specifically, is misogyny at the root of modern relationship issues? We have some lovely guests to talk about it, and we're going to give the mic to them in a minute. But first of all, I want to say hello to my audience. Hello to PaulCast6. I think the hardcore MAGA beta cucks are the reason for all the world's problems. Maybe. Gelatinous Rube says, is misogyny the root? Yeah, not having enough of it. Thank you for being here, Gelatinous Rube. It's going to be a fun time. Aspects Valkyrie, hello Wick. Well, hello Apex Valkyrie. Hello to you. Yeah, I have some questions, right, that I will probably be asking during this debate. But before we get to that, let's kick it off by introducing our guests and giving them opening statements. So please tell people who you are, what you do, why we should listen to you, and what are your thoughts on this. Dialogue always, you're the one that proposed this topic, so I'm going to give you the mic first. Misogyny, is it the root of modern relationship issues? Go ahead.
So good afternoon. Name is Dialogue Always. Some people have seen me on Twitter. That's kind of, or X is probably the only place that people have seen me at. But I'm under the idea of affirmation of yes, that misogyny is the root of almost every single relationship problem in America today. Simply because I see throughout history, there hasn't been any real answer to the changes that are happening today, and misogyny does not answer it. So, because it doesn't answer the problems, it leaves issues that make everything worse. But I'll explain more further in the debate.
Okay, I guess we'll have to get into it as we go. Thank you for being here, and I'm excited to learn what you mean by this. Lactoid, no stranger to my channel. Go ahead.
Give me just 2 seconds, Wick. Just give me 2 seconds.
Wow, not prepared. I feel my misandry rising as we go. Okay. But
All right, I'm ready.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that. All right, so I'm Lactoid. You can find me on Lactoid TV. I am no stranger to Wick's beautiful channel. So when I heard this, I guess, topic, I guess I'm going to be interested in having my, I believe, opponent kind of elucidate and elaborate more as to what the actual premise is, because it would seem to me that it's a very difficult stance to defend just because of how strong it seems to be, how broad it is. Is it possible that you look at any particular relationship and the dude's a misogynistic dick and it led to the relationship failing? Of course, this could happen, right? But the question is, on the kind of my assumption here is that we're not talking about that. We're talking about some kind of broader societal level examination. And when you look at the broader societal, level, there's a couple trends here that I think make the thesis unlikely. The first one being is that misogynist attitudes have largely declined since the, let's say, early 1900s. Objective measurements of women's legal rights are greatly been expanded since the same time period. However, marriage rates are down. Divorce as a percentage of marriages are up. Overall social satisfaction is down. Women's happiness is down. All the things that were sort of is related here to whether a relationship is successful are all actually going down, despite the fact that misogynistic attitudes are declining. And part of this is the leading causes of separation are things like personality disputes, lack of commitment, et cetera, et cetera. And one more thing, if I could. Another kind of thing that I would ask to be explained is, why do lesbian relationships fail so much more than gay men or different sex couples, right? If misogyny truly is the issue, you would expect that lesbian couples would have higher rates of relationship success, but you actually see the exact opposite, where lesbians are much more likely to have their relationships fail. 41% lesbian divorce rate within 10 years versus only 22% for different sex couples. So I don't know. There's a couple things here that just make me very doubtful of the thesis, but I'm willing to listen, and maybe there's some data here that I'm not aware of.
Okay, well, thank you
Okay.
both for being here.
Okay.
I'm just going to give the mic to Dialogue Always to kind of explain what he means. Go ahead.
So there are four major functions to misogyny: hatred, aversion, traditional roles, and male dominance. Now, granted, whenever you hear misogyny in today's terms, they usually talk about hatred being the primary source, where it does actually function in the sense of violence against women, genuine attacks, and everything else like that. So I would like to open up with, we start from a huge imbalance of violence against women. So almost every uh, reaction, or yeah, every action leads to a reaction. And so the reaction of decades and decades and decades of violence against women and very specific sexual violence against women would lead to an aversion that has more and more fear. It's probably the smaller part of the four that I would like to get into, but can we open up with talking specifically about the hatred so we can just kind of get where I'm going with the most blatant and most obvious part of misogyny?
I am more than down to talk about hating women. What about you, Lactoid? Are you ready?
Always, Wick.
Okay.
Always.
Okay, so as we get further and further into laws that are imbalance, that a lot of men see as an imbalance, domestic violence, a lot of men will say that women are a lot more violent than men in relationships, even though that their violence is not as egregious or as over the top as men are. The fact that men have the more dangerous and deadly impact of violence is pretty much the same view as you would as if you saw a pit bull versus a chihuahua. Granted, chihuahuas are more than likely to attack you far more than pit bulls ever will, but pit bulls have the force multiplier that lead to more and more pain. So the aversion would be kind of like more and more women would see men as dangerous from the beginning, which in relationships make it harder and harder in today's society for women to be open to men just based off the fear of violence. Is there a challenge to that idea?
Yeah, I guess the challenge again would be w- how is this going to be the root cause of relationships failing if when this happened more often relationships were just objectively more successful? If you go back to the early 1900s, domestic violence was more common. It was much more accepted, right? I mean, it wasn't even illegal. You could just beat your wife. Marital rape was legal until the 1950s, I believe. So all
Mhm.
these things were kind of common and accepted and happened at a higher frequency. But but again, in all the objective metrics of relationships succeeding or failing, things are actually getting worse, which to me would point to some other cause. And we can talk. I've got some theories as to what other causes are causing relationships to fail, but it would seem that this isn't the fundamental root cause.
Well, first, when we're talking about objectivity, it depends on how we're looking at a lot of the statistics. So, for example, yes, marriages are held together longer, but that's because they had laws that prevented women from being able to divorce um, the same way they have now. So it's kind of like saying, as a 6 year old, you you can't leave your parents and whatever else, but as an 18-year-old, you can leave your parents if it comes to an argument, simply from the fact that when you're 6, you don't have the right to separate from someone who's abusing you, but as an 18-year-old, you can. So I don't know if that's a plus or it can be presented as a plus. That's I would argue if at best it's neutral, if any, at worst it's negative, that a woman cannot walk away from a situation where they're being harmed.
So this is a fair point that the specific laws in place could have prevented some women from leaving, but I'm kind of factoring that in when I'm talking about these data points, right? So even when like when you look at the time period of when women could just leave, again there were still more misogynistic attitudes, and there were still these problems, much more so than today, but they were more likely to stay with their partner. They were more likely to report being satisfied. That's a big one, right? They're more
Mhm.
likely, and this is a kind of a general trend amongst most like interpersonal relationships today. The quality has generally gone down pretty considerably, and so this is why I said I think the thesis is just so strong and why it's so difficult to defend is because you're saying that like misogyny is the root of modern relationship problems, but modern relationship problems, if we're kind of narrowing in on what's causing modern relationship problems, it's things like social media, it's things like anxiety disorders and depression, right, which has been affected women dramatically disproportionately. That is much more relevant than I think
Well,
misogyny is.
well, like I said, there's four elements to it. Hatred, like I said, is the easiest one to get into because it's the easiest one to battle back with. The second one is aversion. So now, since we'll put a pin in hatred and go to aversion. So a lot of men over time, especially now, have entered a world where there isn't really an understanding of how to move upon this world that now has rules, regulations, laws, and restrictions against violence against men. So the idea of just walking over to a woman, asserting your dominance, showing social control, and then she's going to be yours for the rest of your life is far more diminished now than it was back in the day. So with that misunderstanding of how the or with that not understanding of how to move in this new world where women now have rights and restrictions and abilities to maintain their own lives, a lot more men are a lot more adverse to interacting with women, which means there's going to be fewer options for both men to interact with women and women to interact with men.
Just so I understand what you're saying, and I think this is what you're saying. If you're not, please correct me if I'm wrong. But what I hear you say is that because relationship dynamics based on laws, norms, social customs have changed so much that men, young men specifically, no longer know how to interact with women because of their, in your words, would be misogynistic upbringings where they've been given this misogynistic tale of how to approach women and assert dominance and all these things.
Mhm.
This has led to men just not knowing how to deal with women in the modern context, which leads to a failure to even get a relationship in the first place. Is that kind of
And
your
it,
argument?
it
Did I get that right?
yes, and just to add on to that, it's kind of like a adds on to the fact that a lot of men are not just confused, but they're fearful because now they genuinely don't know what would be considered violent or what would be considered aggressive or anything else because there hasn't been, which goes into my third part, traditional roles, because there hasn't been a way to explain to men how to move in this new world simply because of a misogynistic worldview that's incapable of stepping back.
Yeah, I think that you're describing things that are real. These are real phenomena, where especially, and we kind of saw a little bit of that phenomena. I think that you're sort of hinting at, especially at the end of Me Too. There was some studies that demonstrated that there was a sort of drop in um, uh, especially male mentors feeling comfortable mentoring younger women because of potential implications, because of certain accusations that could arise. All of that is true. And if we're just talking about, let's talk about the modern context and ways we can improve gender dynamics, I think that'd be, a very potent point of like how we should address the issue. But again, I think aversion to women at now is at an all-time low if you were to compare it to almost any other point in history. I mean, the number of sex segregated spaces are far down in terms of both schooling and workplaces, definitely. Within those workplaces, what roles women are socially accepted to have has changed dramatically, become much more expansive than it used to be. And I think people generally are much more comfortable when it comes to, I guess, generally speaking, being around women, interacting with women in all facets of life, as opposed to the 50s, where I think most of the time people were only comfortable with women if they were willing to be a housewife, or maybe if they were their secretary, like, very, very limited roles. So again, I'm not buying that there's this any like this because I mean, first of all, you would agree there's no upswell in misogyny compared to the 50s, right? I mean, you would agree that overall society's gotten much more tolerant of women. Sexist attitudes have declined dramatically, and there's a lot of data on this. So I mean,
Mhm.
it's just factually true that we've become a lot less misogynistic over time. So just kind of going down your list here, and you can take some time to explain. If we've gotten generally less hateful, DV rates lower, if we've gotten and rape rates, I guess accepted rape rates lower, we've gotten less averse because of less sex segregation. Generally, I think you wouldn't disagree that traditional gender roles, their importance has sort of declined in society compared to the early 1900s. I think that's pretty clear. And then dominance. I mean, women can vote, they can own property, they can have credit cards, they can. I mean, there's all sorts of legal rights now that they didn't have before. Um, Back when they would rate themselves again as more satisfied. So I guess can you explain to me, because normally if we're going to say something is the root cause of something, we would expect to see a correlation
Mhm.
where if that decreased, then relationships would get better. But we're seeing the opposite correlation. We're seeing as this decreases, relationships are getting worse. And so my question is why? Why
So,
are relationships getting worse?
so my answer is twofold. One, arguably relationships are not getting worse; they're just fewer. But to answer your question, to get into the third part of that is traditional roles. This is the part where um, I directly place this on the foot of misogyny. So, since we are not in a culture anymore where traditional roles are as fluid or as solid as they were in the past, more and more women are making considerably more money. More and more women are at advanced places in society. More and more women are dominating multiple fields. More and more roles for men are either devalued or being removed from from our day-to-day society. So, like, again, warehouses. At one time, a man could work at a warehouse and be able to support his entire family based on his own income. Now, warehouses can barely support you by yourself. So, the problem is there's still a dynamic there that is controlled by a misogynistic view. A misogynistic view is that men take care of the finances and everything else. The woman takes care of the home or is secondary. But in a field where men and women are making just as much, if not in many fields, women are making more. Misogyny, and we'll go into male dominance for that one, a male dominated traditional value field has not created an answer for how we are supposed to enter that new society. So now women are creating more, they're owning more, they're holding more, men are holding less. Men are adverse. They might not be as adverse, but they are adverse. So men approach women less, and women are not told to approach women
No,
because of misogynistic
just
worldviews.
just just to be clear, DA, you would recognize that a lot of this is from women as well. Like a lot of women will not, right, be the sole breadwinners, right, still because they want that traditional role. Like so
Because they
to
have
I
a
guess to place this
misogynistic
on the
worldview.
feet of men feels wrong.
I didn't place on the feet of men. I placed it specifically on the feet of misogyny.
Okay.
Misogyny is the worldview. Misogyny is not men. Every single man is not responsible for this, but the worldview of a male dominated society has created a world where women do not see it as their role to be able to pick up, certain parts that were seen by men for the years. If you're the woman making more money, you're not going to seek out a man that is making considerably less and accept him taking the roles that were supposed to be for women.
Okay, and you would blame that on misogyny. Okay, fair enough. Go ahead.
Do you see? Would you argue that any kind of adherence to traditional gender roles? Would you say that that is part of that is part of misogyny, or that is misogyny?
Yes, because by the definition of misogyny, all four elements, including traditional roles, have to be part of it. Which is why I broke it down into four different parts.
Where are you getting these? I guess where is this like just like a novel theory, or these four elements? I mean, where does that come from?
I mean,
Because
if
I
you
can
can,
imagine. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, like, because I can imagine a relationship, let's say, where let's say, for very valid biological reasons, the woman wants to stay home and breastfeed and take care of the child. And then because of that, that would free me up to go and do work. Okay. I don't hate her. I don't dislike her. I love my wife. Let's say I I'm generally fine with women. I got no real problem. But I'm gonna go to work. I don't beat her or punch women or anything like this. I'm just gonna go to work. I'm gonna make money, and because I'm freed up for that role, while she, I guess overcomes all the issues that come with postpartum, where she breastfeeds a child, where she kind of works through all that and takes care of the child. I mean, this is sort of like a traditional like gendered role unit, but I don't really see misogyny here. I don't see any kind of pathological um, dislike for women. I just see this just makes sense because of how we are. And I don't see a problem with that. I don't see why that's misogynist.
Sure, but like I said, there's four elements to that. And I'm not accusing you of misogyny. I don't know you. What I'm saying is, in a misogynistic
Yeah,
worldview,
but hold on.
which
To answer his question, like he's not talking about himself. He's giving you a hypothetical couple where
no, I'm answering him.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I just want to make
um,
sure that he wasn't speaking of Lactoid, right? Lactoid doesn't know anything about women, right? In that sense.
I know everything there is to know about women, okay?
Yeah,
Which is not a lot.
go ahead.
so the argument is, in a misogynistic worldview, there is no other world that is considered. So while you may be a person who is more open to traditional values and everything else like that, the misogynistic worldview, which if you look at every single element of how relationships are supposed to be dictated and the media sources of how we're supposed to see relationships, we don't even lean into the idea of how a relationship is supposed to work if, say, the female is taking the more um, financially motivated role while the man's taking the secondary role. We don't have a worldview for that simply because most people would not accept it. Well, not most people, but a significant number of people would not accept it.
Okay, I mean, if this is your definition that you're working with, I guess right now I'm tentatively in the position that misogyny made relationships better. I'm tentatively on the position that the root of all successful relationships is misogyny, because it would seem as though the correlation is going my way, right? When you have just women together, the relationship's more likely to fail. Maybe you need a little bit of that male misogyny, right?
No,
Some of those traditional gender roles.
absolutely not. And again, the only statistics you were citing for whether or not marriages stay together or whether or not marriages are further back in the past are again during a time where women had less and less ability to separate from the marriage. So
I'm
when
talking about
you
right
get
now.
but no, that's what I'm saying. When you look at, because when you're making comparative statements, you're comparing the past with a misogynistic world to a present world, and the
No, no,
present
no.
world.
I'm comparing right now, like lesbian relationships to straight couple relationships, or even to gay men, right? Like
Mhm.
lesbians are the most likely to divorce and most likely to break up of any kind of pairing. And part of this is because women tend to be more neurotic, men tend to be more aggressive, but women tend to be more neurotic, and neuroticism is highly linked with relationship instability. And this is like well-known psychological research. So to me, that would be much more determinative of the fact that relationships are not doing so hot is because anxiety and neuroticism are also going up, as opposed to misogyny, because then I guess you'd have to argue, maybe you do argue this. I mean, do you think that there is misogyny within lesbian relationships that's at a higher rate than within straight couple relationships?
I don't think misogyny really plays that much of a role in either relationship, simply because there's not a traditional role there. There's not a woman is not the role of the man, or the man is not the role of the woman in a gay relationship or a lesbian relationship. There isn't that dynamic there. So that would more be based on how the two interact than a system of explaining how heterosexual relationships work. So it's kind of like bringing in information about, I don't know, like reptiles into a conversation about how mammals handle weather or handle cold. It's a completely different situation because there's no defined misogynistic role for lesbian or gay relationships.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, fair enough, but that's kind of what I'm saying. Where in a lesbian relationship, I'd be surprised if you were to say that well, like there's a major factor of misogyny here. But yet, despite this misogyny lacking, their relationships are less successful. And I guess going back to the thesis here, which is misogyny is the root of modern relationship problems,
Mhm.
it would, again, I guess my scientist brain or my science brain is just like, whenever, okay, if this is the root of, then we increase root and then we see more of. But that doesn't seem to like be how the stats are turning out. There's anecdotal things you can point to where, yeah, like there are specific, especially like some, Gen Z men that are like, memeing about women on Twitter, which absolutely happens. Don't get me wrong. Um, but overall, it would seem, and I guess this is my proposition then, I'll just make a positive claim for you to contend with. My proposition is that the modern relationship problems are mostly defined by the lack of ability of humans, the declining ability of humans to socially interact. I think that overall you're seeing a spike in depression, spike in anxiety, spike in neuroticism. A lot of this is being driven by social media. A lot of this is being driven by social isolation. And people are becoming bad at engaging with people in person. And that's a cornerstone for relationships, right? You
Well,
have to be able to get people and understand people and get along with people. And
a
Gen Z
spike
is just
compared to
terrible at doing it
what?
compared to older generations. Like
Older
even
generations. You mean no? So there's a spike compared to a time period that one had fewer and fewer divorces based on the fact that women didn't have as substantial of a role in society as they have today. Two, a lot of the things that you're pointing to, neuroticism, depression, a lot of that wasn't even looked at until very recently. I think the whole field of psychology did not really look too much into depression and neuroticism the way they do now in like 1950s, 60s, 70s. I would even argue to the 90s. It isn't until fairly recently that people started looking more and more into the human condition
Okay,
as to why
just
people are.
for my
uh,
clarification, then, uh, DA, dialogue always. Is your claim here then that the spike we have seen or has been reported in science magazines and studies, etc., of spikes in depression, spikes in loneliness, spikes in all the things that Lactoid mentioned, that these are a result of simply misdiagnosis in the past rather than an actual increase? Is that your argument?
A lack of diagnosis in the past. It's kind of
Like
like
a lack of
autism too.
diagnosis. So you don't trust the spikes as being actual spikes. We're just seeing what was always there rather than something is new. Is that your
Yeah,
argument?
there's not. I think therapy exploded in the last like 10 years, where it was nearly non-existent up until fairly recently. So you wouldn't even know if a lot of these things were even diagnosed. I mean, if you look at if you definitely look at the past and like the use of barbiturates or the use of cocaine or or I would argue certain areas had massive homelessness problems of people who just could not function in society. Those were never seen as like depression statistics or anything else like that. They weren't even counted. Whereas today, more and more people are going into the field and going to therapists and going to psychologists and trying to find out what's going on instead of just saying, hey, let me drink this bottle or swallow these pills to make myself feel better.
Yeah, I just have to disagree. I've read some psychologists on this topic specifically, the declining mental health of America generally, and I mean, the things you're saying right now are going against a lot of the conclusions and theories being proposed by basically all, if not most, sorry, most if not all modern psychologists. Which there's objective metrics we can look at. The number of close relationships between boomers and Gen Z is dramatically different. Even though boomers are older and a lot of their friends have died off, they consistently have more friends. They consistently have closer friends. They consistently feel as though they can trust their friends more. Gen Z is dramatically lower in all these metrics. When it comes to suicide, suicide rates are significantly higher. I don't know if that, I am rejecting that this was like a failure to measure suicides in the past compared to today. When we're seeing spiking in suicides being correlated here with the spiking mental health problems.
So
I
wait,
can
wait,
I can send you some papers on this.
can I challenge the one about suicides? So
Sure.
if you look at almost all of America, we're talking about American history, right? We're not talking about world history. So if you
Mhm.
look at almost all of American history up until fairly recently, the United States was at war a lot, which means our
We're at
young
war
men
now.
nowhere near the same. Um, which meant that many of our young men were constantly in battle, constantly somewhere else in the world, constantly doing something out. And those age ranges of those men that were at war would have been more likely the ones committing suicide. So, yes, there is a spike in suicides, but I would not argue that it was simply because of like this generation being a lot less a lot having a lot more mental problems. And I would argue that there was a lot more going on in those time periods than there are
Ten,
now.
yeah, ten
Wait,
dollars. Just real quick, $10 from Dirty Deeds for free says, is dialogue basing this on a tabula rasa basis of philosophy? He seems to be referring to a causal chain of events stemming from an original sin, misogyny, that has corrupted the world. I'll let you answer
I'm,
that,
I'm
Phil.
not.
Then
I'm not going to go as far as to claim it's corrupting the world, but it is corrupting the dynamic of relationships, and
okay,
that's because more and more, like I said, as women are starting to establish themselves more, and again I say misogyny and not men specifically because women fall victim to this too, and I would argue that a lot probably women fall victim to it significantly more than men.
of course they do.
Um, well, no, and that is because women have grown up
We
in
guys.
the dynamic of, if you look at almost every media source, if you look at every single type of traditional role and everything else, men have been treated as the ones that come in to rescue the women, and the women are not only um secondary, but they're also, I guess, the world moves for them, but they don't move the world. So when you go into the world thinking that, you expect more from the man outside of finances because you're able to maintain or grow your own finances as females.
Go ahead, Lactoid.
So I wanted to a prior point you made regarding the fact that we used to be at war more so than we are now. Um, it almost feels as that was a point a little bit in my favor because you're right that going to war and getting PTSD is going to be correlated with suicide, right? And so why is it that the Vietnam generation has lower suicide rates than we do, or our current generation, our current rates? You would expect to be much higher. You would
Well,
expect that people coming back from Nam would drive that rate, which, and by the way, the rate is higher for Vietnam veterans, just to be clear. I'm not, saying that they don't have their own struggles, but you would expect that, that this would drive it even higher. But not even war, not even Vietnam could have as pervasive of an effect in society as Twitter and
that's
Facebook,
because
as these things that I think are really, again, driving a lot of the modern relationship problems. The feeling of social isolation that I think in turn drives a lot of depression, anxiety, etc., and gets people. And another thing, and one more thing, I saw one pretty recently, a psychologist giving a lecture that I thought was really fascinating, in which he argued that one of the main reasons right now that we're seeing a lot of these social problems developing is because of the lack of boredom. Is that when you're bored, when you're sitting at home doing nothing, you become much more apt to want to go and meet people because you're fucking bored, right? You're, oh my god, sitting at home as a kid used to suck because you were sitting on a couch. You're like, this sucks. I got to go play with my friends. I got to get on a bike. We got to go around town. I got to go talk to that girl. I got to meet up that girl. All these things. I have all this motivation to go and do life because there is this penalty if I don't, which is I'm fucking bored. Now there's no, you have everything at your
Well,
fingertips.
to
There is
to
no
to
boredom.
piggyback off of that for a bit, to kind of like I guess, yeah, piggyback off of it. There's an old joke where they tried to solve the uncontrolled birth rates that were spiking in Africa, and so they dropped PlayStations, right? They airdropped PlayStations on it. And then when the women wanted out of sex, the men were just like, "No, I'm busy playing my video game." And then there's this concept of like the WoW widow, right? Like the World of Warcraft widow. Like people get into a relationship, they get into marriage and things like that. And the man doesn't want to wine and dine her. The man doesn't want to have a physical relationship. He's busy playing his video games. He's He's raiding the dungeon, right?
I got
So
reels. Why would I
yeah,
go to
exactly.
dinner?
So I guess to Lactoid's point there, that does make sense, does it not? That
No.
no? Okay,
Can I counter
explain.
that?
And thank
So
you for the raid, Mercado Media. Nice to see you. We're talking about misogyny and whether or not it's the root of relationship issues. So
so
explain. Go ahead.
I can counter that with what was going on historically in each one of those time periods. So if we start with like the early 1900s, we lean more and more towards the shift of the Industrial Revolution, which meant more and more men were working. Women were working too, but more and more men were at work for longer hours doing a lot of things. The ones that were not working were involved in criminal activity, which is why you saw a major spike of murders and also robberies during that time period. Then you get to World War One, which you really can't talk about suicide rates during World War One because it was a war. Following World War One, there was another spike in industrialism, the more and more growth for manufacturing. Men were far more busier at that time. It was also the time of great expansion when it comes to housing and forestry and everything else with the Work and Jobs Act, which had more and more men working outside of the home. So they weren't home. They didn't have idle hands. They weren't bored. Then you got to World War II. Again, another war. You can't really talk too much about a war because a war is going on. Suicide rates are going to drop because more people are, and you can't even count suicide rates because I mean, on battlefields, you can't tell how many people died from suicide and how many people were killed by the enemy. Then you get past World War
You
II.
can kind of, but go ahead. Yeah.
Then you get into World War II, or you get past World War II, you get into the Korean War. Same type of concept. It wasn't until Vietnam where people actually started checking into, like, okay, are people actually being killed, or are people killing themselves, or are people killing each other? And that's where you start getting more into the grenade incidents and like the extreme violence and the extreme drug use, the crazy amounts of drug use. So if you look at crime statistics following Vietnam, crime spiked at an exponential rate as Vietnam veterans came home. That's why suicide rates weren't as high as crime rates because two things: manufacturing, men were working, and crime. Crime was like extreme for a lot of these people. It wasn't until the 90s where we didn't have a major war going on. Even you can argue that Afghanistan and Iraq, following that, were not exactly wars of like everybody was fighting. There weren't really a major draft, just soldiers were fighting, that you started getting into the mental state of men. So the collapse of manufacturing in the early 2000s had more idle hands for men, and the disappearance of wars, drafts, major conflicts led to idle hands for men. Once it started being idle, men started getting into the sense of, hey, I'm not making nearly enough money to be able to establish families or be able to grow my own, and the world is changing in a way that doesn't exactly fit this misogynistic worldview. If you start listening to a lot of the men that ended up killing themselves, especially when they left letters or if they left videos or anything else, they talk about that. I can't move on. I can't grow. So what's the point of me being here? That's why suicide rates are spiking.
I guess I listened to everything you said, but I'm struggling to understand it. I'm going to be honest with you. So, uh, I, okay, I have this. I even wrote it down. So we got more men working during the Industrial Revolution. Sure, you also have more, proportionally more women working as well.
Mhm.
You have World War One. We do, yes. Men went to go fight wars, um, and then they came back. There was a spike in industrialism. There was also a spike in women's rights, women's right to vote, et cetera, the suffragette movement, all that.
Mhm.
You have then World War Two, and then the Korean. Like, what is this? I'm confused. Like, please, you're not making some kind of claim here that the suicide that all the experts are wrong and the suicide rates aren't actually going up, right?
No, I'm not making a claim about the rates going up. I'm making the claim of why rates go up. So, for example,
Okay, why were they lower in the past? Let's start with this.
yeah,
Why was it that suicide rates were lower in the past than they are now?
because
Just broadly speaking.
significantly more men could do more with less. As in, like I said, the collapse of manufacturing goes side to side with that. Um, when manufacturing was major, more and more men were working, more and more men were actively building their lives, building their societies, building their worlds. you have less idle hands and less dissociation from the rest of the world. When men are working significantly fewer jobs, well, not fewer jobs, but significantly fewer, lower valued jobs, and are lower valued in society, as you go back to the manufacturing age, um, more and more men are trying to ask, why am I here? What is this for? And then that's where suicides are starting to kick in.
So okay, I guess a couple things about this. I don't know. I am disputing with you. I'm going to dispute this. I don't. I haven't seen any research indicating that like this is at all a major cause. If you're saying that unemployment rate, yeah, unemployment rate, I suppose, is going to be related. But the unemployment rate is there's especially periods in the 1900s where suicide rates were lower, where employment was higher. Even during the Great Depression, et cetera. You can go back and look at those time periods. And the other thing is the greatest increase in depression and anxiety and suicide has been amongst women who have seen the most empowerment in terms of participation in the workforce. And
Mhm.
I guess using your terminology here, less idle hands in the workforce during this time period as opposed to men. And
So
even amongst men, I mean, median income, for example, has been, even when adjusting for inflation, has been going up over time,
Just
right? I mean,
to yeah,
wait,
but
wait, wait.
oh,
So,
go ahead. But
so I made a specific claim, and I didn't say that there were fewer jobs. I said that there were fewer jobs that made as much money for men, not as much money, but yeah, I would argue probably made as much money for men as there are now. So back in the past, one income factually could be able to build a family, maintain the family, and hold on to the home, and even have extra money to be able to do extra things. Nowadays, that's not as likely to happen. And since that is lower and lower, and again, the other four elements of misogyny are still there, still relevant, more and more men are checking out of society. When you
so
check out of society,
uh,
that's where it starts leading to a higher suicide rate.
just to kind of put some information in here, there's a book released in 2020 called "Deaths of Despair and the Future of Capitalism" that talks about this kind of phenomenon of why suicide is rising, because it's not rising everywhere equally. It's rising
Mhm.
specifically in areas of the nation,
Industrial
right,
nations.
of America that have seen huge downswings in industrialization and or not industrialization, but industrial jobs and manufacturing and things like that, especially among the working class, people without 4-year degrees specifically. They have had huge spikes, men specifically and women both, in deaths of despair and suicide and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, so this does seem to suggest that when jobs go away, when there's economic anxiety, and when all these things happen, suicide does go up.
no,
And a
I'm not
good,
denying. Like I said, like if you want to relate unemployment to suicide, that's fine.
it's not just
But
unemployment.
hold on, but sort of. We're talking about not having a job, getting let go from a job, and not being able to find a job. We're talking about those people, right?
Right.
There were time periods in the past where these rates existed at higher levels, and the suicide rates were lower. Right now, women are experiencing employment much more so than they did in the 1950s. It's not even close. Yet they're far more depressed and have far more relationship struggles. I just, I'm the thing I struggle with is by all the economic metric, yeah, is despair going to be more concentrated in certain areas? Sure, but we are seeing a national trend here. There is a national trend, especially amongst our youth, especially women, especially girls, where for this demographic specifically, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation are going up dramatically.
Okay, just to
Except for the fact
just
that,
hold on, just real quick.
Go
The
ahead.
national thing, the spikes we're seeing now are primarily among older men and middle-aged men,
yeah, so
specifically.
three things. Three
It's
things I want
always
to,
been there.
no, I want to
No,
make
no,
sure
The
hold
three
on.
greatest,
things that,
the
As
great,
compared
yeah,
to
yeah.
before, we are seeing huge spikes not in youth rates, but in middle-aged and older men specifically.
so,
Middle-aged and older men have always had a higher suicide rate. The bigger spikes we're seeing, like the biggest changes, have been in like younger people.
That's not
reason why
that's not
the
what I'm
reason
seeing
why I
here. But
specifically said And it's not just whether or not somebody gets fired or loses their job or anything else like that. I'm talking specifically about the devaluation of manufacturing. And that, because everyone could be working, but the suicide rate would be exactly the same. For example, if you look at comparative countries, South Korea, Japan. These are two good examples of places that have the same problems that the United States have with a higher spike in suicidality. And that is specifically because there's a certain element of economic certainty that is not there. So without that economic certainty and without the ability to step into other things because of a worldview of, okay, if I can't make enough in order to establish a family, and if I don't have enough to, you know, um, continue this traditional role that I'm expecting of, what's the point of me being here? Which is why it's not just people are losing their jobs or it's the economic anxiety on top of the fact that a lot of people feel like they're not going anywhere, which is leading to the high suicide rates.
And you think that so okay, that's your proposition. I've already explained why I dispute it.
I do
Do
want to
you
move
think?
off the suicide stuff back to the relationship
Yeah,
problems.
yeah. I
Well,
just
well,
wanted
no,
to.
well, sure, but and I guess I understand why we're on this because my proposition is um, that the reason for the modern relationship problem, the reason why things are getting worse, has to do with factors other than misogyny, right? And one of these factors that I'm pointing to is increasing depression, anxiety, really being driven by social isolationism, which is much more higher than it was in the past. I mean, we'll just go right through it. Do you think that generally, like, do you trust the data dialogue that shows that younger people today um, are lonelier, have more social isolation, less friends, and overall struggle more with social interaction than the older generations? Do you accept that?
Um, yes and no. I accept the numbers, but the problem is like there's far more research today than it is in the past. So there's a lot of areas and people that were just not counted back in the earlier numbers. So yes, I'd have to accept it just simply because numbers are numbers. But it's just kind of like if half or a significant number portion of the country is not even counted or not even um, recognized in a lot of these statistics, it's hard to really make strong claims on that.
This is the tough thing though. Like the psychologists are measuring this, and these psychologists are accounting for things like underreporting when they're plotting out these trajectories. And I mean, this is the reason why the experts here, when they're writing these papers, and I looked it up, like the greatest increases are amongst younger people. Um, this is why we're seeing these trends, at least what these experts are pushing, is because hey, look, uh, you know, it's not their first rodeo. Like they're taking in this data and they're accounting for all these different factors. Younger people are more socially isolated than they were today, and the reason why I brought up suicide is this is something that is measurable, right? This is an action that is very specifically measurable that doesn't rely on self-reporting because we can see people are doing it more. They're committing this action more often than they used to. Um, and this is tied very closely with increased rates of social isolation, increased rates of depression, increased rates of anxiety, which are then in turn correlated very strongly with social media, the development of social media, the kind of the lack of boredom. And you're right, like in some ways, lack of boredom, and along with removal of lead from paint and arguably abortion and a couple other things, lack of boredom has reduced crime to some degree because yeah, when people are bored, they might be more criminally inclined as well, right? Because fuck it, I'm bored. I might steal that car, go for a joyride. Sure, I get it.
You took my
Um,
response to that was my response to that. A lot of
yeah,
the
but they're
suicide.
sadder. But they're sadder and they have a harder time engaging with each other.
You think
That is
people
one of
that
the
commit
negatives.
I mean, the only question I would have to that is, do you think people that commit crimes are happier?
No, I
But
would
no,
have.
no, no.
Yeah,
Let me tell you why I
by
made
and
that argument.
large,
Let me
no,
point
I
out why I
understand.
made that argument.
Yeah, and you can in just a second. You're right. The specific people who do the crimes because they face consequences are probably in lower socioeconomic positions. Like if we look at their particular lives, they are probably less happy. But I think that the broader trend is people are getting less happy over time, and crime is going down.
So the reason why I specifically talked about crime of the past and arguments against suicide would be something along the lines of, yes, you know what? A good example of how I would argue this is we had an increase of school shootings, from like early 1990 or from the mid 1990s to today. That was unprecedented. That wasn't even seen before. But that's because arguably, where we would have more school shootings now, beforehand, we had a significant number of more serial killers. So what I'm saying is we are in a different atmosphere, so certain things would increase while other things would decrease. So while crime decreased, suicide increased. And if you look at a lot of the countries, if you look at a lot of the countries that I mentioned and also countries that I didn't mention, if you look at South Korea, if you look at Japan, they have significantly high suicide rates but significantly lower crimes. But then if you look at other countries that have very, very strong traditional values and very, very strong male-dominated roles, crime is exceedingly high, suicide rates are very low. If you look at, for a good or a better example of that, if you look at the Black community, up until fairly recently, and even now, the Black community's suicide rate did not increase, even though their conditions are statistically worse than white men. White men have a high suicide rate, incredibly high suicide rate. And then when you get into Asian men, it's insanely high. So we're talking about different factors and how people respond to distress.
I feel like all of this goes to my point that I'm
Does it?
talking about. I'm talking about correlations and inverse correlations. Like, this specific thing is happening, which is leading to X, Y, Z. The thesis that you came in with is um, misogyny is the root of modern relationship problems.
Yes.
And now where we're at is I'm hoping we're just sort of accepting. Now you're saying that maybe it's due to underreporting, which again,
But no,
this
I'm
just
just,
I think that you currently don't have a basis to like dismiss the data because of the speculation.
which I
But
didn't.
I think what we're looking at the current data, which is that mental health is declining, and mental health, incredibly, very specifically, is declining the most amongst younger women. Like
So,
this is where you see the broadest mental health decline. Is it declining across the board? Sure,
so the
but
only the only reason why we even went this long into suicide is I'm just challenging the suicide rates of being like, um, that I'm challenging your argument about
yeah,
suicide
we need
rates.
more
But
misogyny to reduce suicide.
no, we
To,
don't.
to, to be clear, just to be clear, and I'm just reading this from the suicide statistics page from America specifically. Compared to 2022, suicide rates in 2023 have decreased among individuals aged 15 through 24, 25 through 34, and 45 through
2001 or
54,
2021?
and 65 plus, while they have increased for ages 35 to 44 and 55 to 64. So,
What time period did you say?
from
2021 to
2022
2024?
to 2023.
Yeah, if you look at that 1 year, you might see a
I'm just
decrease.
I'm
But if
just
you look,
reading it from the. This is from a 10-year study too, right? Like, so 10-year trends in
yeah,
suicide rate.
what's
Um,
the trend between like 2005 and
I'll look.
2025?
I'll look. I don't know specifically.
Sure.
so
Say
the only reason why I'm arguing your suicide point is because you can't look at the statistic alone and not look at the surrounding factors of why certain things were happening. I mean, I'm if I can remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Wick, if you can find it, I think one of the highest spikes in suicide happened between the years 2004 and 2012, and that was specifically around the time of the economic downturn.
I'll look.
I'm pretty sure one of the biggest spikes, and the reason why it's going to be declining if you look at between 2022 and 2023, one of the biggest spikes was during COVID
Wait,
because
COVID,
people were socially isolated.
but you're kind of making my point that like when we're talking about suicidality, it's not specifically leaning on like whether or not misogyny or relationships can fix that because there's other outside factors that would determine how people respond to it.
That this is my point.
No,
Yes,
no,
there's
no, no,
other
no.
factors that are causing relationship
But
problems.
I didn't when I'm talking about relationship problems specifically and how misogyny is ruining relationship problems, I am setting aside the suicide rate on that because, like I said, certain countries that have a higher idea of misogyny have an insane amount of crime and violence, as other countries that have a lower idea of misogyny, like Japan or South Korea, are having high suicide rates. So though what I'm saying is those offset each other. Misogyny has little to nothing to do with whether or not people respond to, like, how people respond to depression.
Okay, just for some facts and figures here,
Go
the
ahead.
suicide rate rose from 2001 to a peak in 2018 at 14.2% per 100,000. It decreased slightly in 2019 and 2020, and then rose again in 2021 and 2022, marking a major
COVID.
upward
Yeah.
trend. I'm not seeing the specific thing, so I'll keep looking on that. But it
So that
went up, then it dipped a little bit, and then it went up again. So
Yes.
I'm
so what
not
I'm
sure
trying to do
And
is
I want to point out. I
the
want to point out
bigger.
that the major, yeah,
I
the
don't know what the
major
bigger slope
spike
line
at the
is.
end.
So.
Sure, but when we're talking about the 2022, 2023, COVID isolation, right? I mean, these people were flush with money, right, because of all the stimulus that we were handing out, the ridiculous unemployment benefits. The main trend that was driving a lot of the mental health issues was social isolation. You couldn't leave your house. You couldn't go to your church. You couldn't go to your family's house. You were stuck. Yes, this is of course is related to things like anxiety, depression. This is like well known. Well, like I don't think anybody can refute this. Like
$10,
this kind
yeah,
of
$10. You know what people can't refute? It's the $10 people give me to say things. $10 from Psychonaut. Economics seems like a stronger root for why modern relationships have issues of today, even by this conversation, let alone data. And then we have $5 from Gelatinous Rube to say, enjoy these calmer, good faith discussions. Hit the like button if you agree, or super chat if you disagree. Well, thank you for that.
so I'm trying to be very specific.
Did
I'm
he
trying to
say
be
that in the thing?
Yes,
Like if you agree.
yes. Super chat if
I'm,
you
I'm,
disagree.
I'm
Um,
trying to be I'm trying
no,
to
I
be very
guess here, if
specific
I
and
may, just real quick. Um, I guess my frustration with the conversation and how I understand why we've gone down the economic rabbit
Sure.
hole and things
Mhm.
like that, but I was hoping to kind of focus more on the interpersonal relationships and why. And one, are they having more problems today than they were back in the day? I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's true that the people in the 1900s, while marriage rates may be higher and divorce rates may be lower, I don't know if that's indicative, or I don't know if that correlates with them having less problems. It's just they had no way to deal with it back then, or they dealt with it in different ways than they do today. Instead of, for example, divorcing your wife, you just beat her, right? And that's how you solved your issues. Whereas today, you can't beat your wife. And so you have to do other things. And there is other outlets, I guess, for people's anger. So I guess I don't know if the premise of there even being more problems today, I don't know if that's true.
well, and what I'm saying is a lot of problems other people are looking at, because I'm pointing to when people talk about, like, hey, women are being more, masculine, or women are, leaving marriages earlier, or women are, or are not having enough kids, or like those type of arguments are I'm arguing that almost every one of those are linked to misogyny. And the problem for that is misogyny. And the reason why the problem for that is misogyny is because misogyny refuses to adapt. Since it refuses to adapt to the changes in our society, it creates a situation where more and more men are finding themselves making substantially less and unable to, quote unquote, dictate terms of a relationship like it used to be in the past. And more women who have far more capital are not even being told how to start taking more of the roles because they have more of the capital.
Here's another criticism I guess I have of your position.
Okay.
Despite the fact that there's less hatred, less aversion, less tradition, and less dominance over women on all these fronts today than there was, like as a gender, than there was in the 1950s, you're going to say, I think, well, this is simply an example of misogyny failing to adapt,
Mhm.
which is what's causing modern issues. And if that's the argument, it would seem to me a little bit that your position is unfalsifiable, right? It would seem to me that every single time I point out something where, hey, but how could misogyny have caused this if back when there was more misogyny, this was worse? The response is going to be, well, look, once we got over that misogyny, there's this other misogyny that metastasizes, it changes, it failed like it, or it
No,
fails to adapt, I guess, in certain ways, and it causes men to have insecurity. Now, does this insecurity translate onto relationships? I guess is your argument that it does. Maybe, but then it would seem to be that the solution would be to go back to the more, I guess, hardline misogyny than to go down the current trend of the changing misogyny, I guess. Like what is
no,
the end goal here? What's the end
absolutely
game
not.
here?
So every claim that you made, I did have an answer to that was not that simplistic. So when you made the claim of like marriage rates were much higher in the past than it was of today, arguably that's because fewer women were allowed to divorce. That's not
Even when they were granted divorce, even when after no fault divorce.
what year are you talking about? Because again,
So
up
after
until
the
close
seven,
to up
yeah,
until the
70s,
70s.
80s, 90s.
One
Yeah,
at a
okay.
time. Let Dialogue finish his question, and then I'll let you answer, Lactoid. Go ahead, Dialogue.
So up until the 70s, so again, I would like to dismiss everything. Well, not dismiss, but we really can't bring in stuff prior to the 70s because divorces were far more complicated. The 70s, 80s, and 90s, women were just starting to get into certain fields. It isn't until fairly recently that women are making as much, if not more, in many fields than men. This is a very recent phenomenon. And so that is the offset of some women didn't leave their marriages simply because, again, they didn't have the ability to make enough money to be self sufficient. So it was an economic decision, as opposed to now, where that economic decision is not there anymore. Now, if a woman feels like they want to walk away from something, they have the capacity to be able to do it, far more than they ever
Sure,
could in the past.
sure. Um, if this thesis, if this is the explanation, then I just want a very concrete answer. Why do lesbians divorce at higher rates?
Because lesbians are a completely different situation. Now, granted, you can say that lesbian women have this and lesbian women have that, and gay men have this and gay men have that, but we're not like lesbian women do not deal with misogynistic views the same way that heterosexual relationships do. The same
Yet they struggle
might
more.
have them. No, they don't. They have their
It's
own
just
problems. Seriously, they have their own problems. Like seriously, lesbian relationships have their own issues, gay relationships have their own issues, heterosexual relationships have their own issues. So trying to make a one-to-one with women that don't even like men or men that don't even like women to women that like men and men that like women is not a really fair argument to make.
the reason why I'm comparing it to lesbians is because I'm pulling out the element, as I'm doing with every argument here. I'm pulling out the element that I think you're trying to um, identify as the problem, which is okay. If we're going to say misogyny is the root of the problems in all relationship, then
Yeah.
we would expect that if there's more misogyny, that the relationships would be more likely to fail, or yeah, more misogyny, the relationships would be more likely to fail, right? And the kind of the way of looking at this, the traditional way, is a same sex or a different sex relationship where you have a woman and then you have a man. Aha, a man. We've identified a potential source of misogyny, right? This guy, maybe he's misogynistic towards women, whether it be explicitly or whether it be implicitly, sort of operating within how society has structured what a man is supposed to be. So either way, obviously, if misogyny is engaging in either of those ways, surely we should have some kind of correlation with negative relationship outcomes then. And so then we'd look at it and we say, okay, what if we pulled the man out and replaced it with another woman?
Okay, so
We would
one of
expect, if your very strong claim of misogyny is the root of modern relationship problems, because
the
lesbians can
ideology.
have relationships too.
Mhm.
We would expect then, if we remove the source of misogyny, that we would remove the root of the relationship problems. But we don't see that. We see the exact opposite. We see these relationships fail more often. We see more
So
reported domestic violence in these situations.
So, do you remember when I said that misogyny is an ideology and misogyny is both perpetrated by men and women, and in some cases can be perpetrated by women far more than men?
Well, this is why I asked you before. Are you saying that there's like a misogyny within lesbian relationships? And your answer before was no.
No,
So
and I'm saying, wait,
yeah,
go
just
ahead. I'm
just
sorry. Go
just real
ahead.
quick, I'm looking at the data here, and there's not a lot of it because it hasn't existed that long. But man and man relationships seem to be better, or at least if we go by the statistic of they stay together and they continue, um,
Yeah.
they are more successful than heterosexual relationships. It wouldn't the argument be that the source of the misogyny isn't the man, it's the woman, right? Like since we
Yes.
remove
Misandry.
the thing that
Yes.
we
No, no, no,
the
no,
thing
no.
that the men hate, right?
Wait.
The problem
Hold,
goes away, right?
hold
Like
on.
isn't
Hold
that the
on.
argument? I don't know.
Because
I
that's
just
why
look, it's a little
but
silly, but you know what I mean?
that's what that's why I kept saying and genuinely saying over and over again that misogyny is an idea that can be perpetrated by the man and the woman. Because yes, women can and have perpetrated misogyny to the point to where the relationship gets ruined. That's why I didn't specifically say men are the root of all problems or men are the reason for the issue. I said misogyny specifically because if you look at a lot of women and you look at a lot of the things that women say, especially when you look at reasons for divorce, a lot of them are linked to old misogynistic ideas that they feel that their husband is not, or
Give us
their ex
examples
at
of
the
this.
time.
Give us an example. Like, can you give us a specific example dialogue? So, for example, you just cited reasons for divorce. What are some reasons for divorce that you would put at the feet of misogyny, and why? Go ahead.
Sure. So one of the biggest reasons for divorce is I can remember what it's called, unreconcilable differences. But then when you get into each one of these divorces and you find out what the unreconcilable differences are, especially if they like release some of the information, a lot of it's not going to be released when you go through marriage counseling and stuff like that, but every once in a while you'll hear it. When you see unreconcilable differences, and I think second is financial reasons, and third is infidelity. Um, when you get to the unreconcilable differences, a lot of them are things like, hey, he's not picking up. Oh, if you're not going to make all of the money, which is supposed to be your role, the least you can do is pick up these other roles in the house. And since you're not picking up these other roles in the house, you don't seem like you're doing the things to show that you love me. And if you hear that more and more and more and more, that is linked to this idea that inside of a relationship, the woman is supposed to be catered to. The man is supposed to do the catering. The man is supposed to match the emotional, sexual, physical, economic
Sure.
needs of the woman.
This would
So,
explain. This all would also explain why lesbian relationships fail more. Women expect someone to wait on them hand and foot, and they're not getting that. So I mean, it just tracks. Look. I'm leaning more towards dialogue. Everything he says here. What do you got for that, Lactoid?
I don't know what you just said. Literally backed up what I was saying. I don't know why you think that leads you more to his argument. Um, my argument is that women psychologically rate higher neuroticism, which is they do have higher
Yeah,
standards
because
and they do
misogyny,
dwell.
right?
That's the link. That's the link that is yet to be made for me when you're saying because misogyny. Um, so you're saying that in
Hold
despite it
on.
being
Like
a well,
if you take a kid, any gender, right? Like just a
uh huh.
kid, and then you wait on them hand and foot. You don't expect them to do anything. You don't expect them to make their own way. You teach them all the time that someone's going to be there to care for you. It
Okay, I see where you're going.
increases their neuroticism levels. This is true
No,
regardless of the
okay.
sexes. And we've had centuries,
Hmm.
right? And many women are raised in this environment where they're taught, right? They don't need to be successful, right? They don't need to chase a guy.
Mm,
They don't need to do
they
really
just
much at all,
deserve it.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
well,
and so
a good
obviously they're
example of
more
this.
neurotic because of this.
No,
A good
let me
example of this.
let me respond to Wick real quick.
I mean, this is kind of a meme argument to be clear,
No,
right?
no,
But
I understand. I was going to say like this is the most sexist, anti-misogynistic argument I've ever heard. I love it. So,
like I said,
uh,
I'm. This is for the purpose of
if the
we're memeing a little
if
bit,
the
but yeah.
if the argument and I know we're memeing, but I'm gonna take the argument on face value. If we're gonna make the argument that like misogyny was so good to women in the sense that they gain this feeling of entitlement that the men should be working and waiting on me hand and foot. I
Yeah,
am the
misogyny
master.
hurts men
It
a
hurt.
lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
misogyny actually hurt the men more. I haven't heard this argument before. I'll take a minute and try to digest it. Some initial problems I have with the argument is that the difference in personality is specifically neuroticism, I think is primarily driven by hormones, to the point where there are some studies where if you give women testosterone, they experience massive drops in neuroticism and higher rates of aggressive personality, because testosterone is linked. And if you give men estrogen, they begin to become more neurotic, and they become less
Yeah,
aggressive.
but hold
Now,
on, just to counter that a little bit. This also happens when you work more. When you work more and do more physical labor and do more physical tasks, your testosterone levels do increase. It's not just injections and things like that, but there are activities that you can do as a man or a woman that will increase your testosterone and boost your testosterone. So the fact that they
right.
have been sitting there unable to, forced not to work, has naturally led to them being more neurotic because they have less testosterone.
Can I steal man
No,
this for a second?
there's no epigenetic kind of theory here. You're right that like there are certain activities you can do, and just being in good shape, by the way, can lead to better hormone regulation. But there's a massive gulf between men and women that really can usually only be mediated by some kind of artificial method, by giving women testosterone injections or giving men estrogen injections, and that's where you actually see the measurable changes. And one last thing, Wick, before, when you said, I think you made it was a mean point as well, but I just want to head it off. When you said, well, maybe the men are just like, this is the reason for the divorce, because when you take away the misogyny, or the thing that men hate, the target of their misogyny, all of a sudden the relationships start working out. That's a good theory, but women initiate 75% of divorces.
Can I steal
So
man this?
once again, I think it's much more closer to the idea of women are just more neurotic, are harder to please. Biologically, they have higher standards, which from an evolutionary perspective makes sense. This is how it works with every mammal species.
Go ahead and steal
So
man
to
it.
steel man my argument, so the first thing I want to challenge is the 75% of women initiate divorce.
60
75%
and
of women,
75.
75% of women do the paperwork. It doesn't mean 75% of women initiated the divorce. A lot of divorces are actually mutual. Just women are the first people to become the plaintiff. That study literally just saw who was the plaintiff in divorce cases and saw that the woman was more than likely to be the plaintiff. That doesn't mean that the woman initiated the divorce. That just means she paid the lawyer and did the paperwork. Second off, if you look at more and more marriage counselings and the ones that are released to the public where people get to find out about how divorces are filed, or what is said during these marriage counselings before they get to divorce, a lot of it is, if you ask a woman what they want inside of a relationship, you would see more and more things, a long list, of extremely long list of things that she sees that the husband is not doing to maintain the relationship. If you look at the man's list, a lot of it are three things, usually along the lines of like sex, affection, or something else like that. But then you get to this word of peace. And then when you start getting into the word of peace, that obviously, if you hyperlink it, you'd start seeing that peace has a million and one things that the man did not mention that he wanted from the woman up until the final stages of the divorce. Which means while the woman is constantly saying, hey, this is what I want, 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 the man himself is going into a steady state of depression because his needs in his mind are not being met. But he's not talking about it because he's been told by a society, a misogynistic society for years, that your needs do not matter other than a few things. So when you get to that final stage, you see the man is reducing what he's supposed to do in the relationship while feeling he's not getting what he needs out of the relationship, while being told by a society he's not supposed to bring up anything up until the last stages of the divorce.
Okay, so I just looked it up. I listened to what you were saying, and I'm going to address it, but I just looked it up. It's not based on who just filed the paperwork. These are actual different studies done by, there's one from Yale, there's a different 2015 study from the American Sociological Association, where they, it was a large survey where they took a sample size and surveyed them as to which one of them considered them to have initiated the divorce. In that study, and the numbers are somewhere between 65 and 75, but in that study, 75% of the women self-identified as the ones that were initiating the divorce, while only about 30% of the men were the ones that identified as initiating divorce. So it's not about simply who's done the legal filings. Secondly, this sort of explanation of, well, it's because men are more likely to I guess, or more resistant to accommodating a woman in a relationship because of some kind of misogynistic attitudes that over time have led men to be less forthright with their feelings, less willing to change and do chores, etc., all this stuff. Um, Once again, I just find this highly unlikely, um, uh, or at least marginal, if it is the case. I find it to be marginal compared to what I think is the more likely explanation, the larger explanation, which is that evolutionarily, in every mammalian species and with humans, women rate higher neuroticism and are harder to please. And this is why we see men have an easier time when it comes to long term relationships with each other compared to women, because yes, with plenty of wonderful things about women, but do have higher standards than men when it comes to relationships, when it comes to long-term relationships, when it comes to marriages. They are usually the picker, they're usually the decider, they're usually the ones where this is why they expect to be approached. Is there like social custom about this? For sure, but there's a reason why this is so consistent across society, all societies over time, and all mammalian species over time, regardless of which one you look at. There is like a sort of biological dance that's happening when men interact with women. And I do think that, just as us, in my vast experience with women, which, although Wick will make fun of, I've been with women before. I've been in long term relationships with women before. There is this stereotype. Yes, women
In
are
real
harder
life
to
or
please
online?
than in real life.
Okay.
I know it's
Just making
crazy. It's
sure.
crazy. Women, I think, the reason why this stereotype exists, and why so much media sort of has identified this stereotype. I don't think it's a created stereotype. I think that they're identifying something that already exists, which is that women do have higher standards. They are harder to please. They do dwell more. They have a harder time accepting things that they feel that they can't change. They have a harder time putting that stuff in the back and focusing on the good things. This is just in the same way men are more aggressive. This is also true. This is why men are dramatically overrepresented in crime. Men tend to be more impulsive. They tend to be more aggressive. This is absolutely the case as well. Um, but a lot of this is hormonal. A lot of this is biological.
Okay,
And I think that our social structures form around that as opposed to vice versa.
$5,
Sure, but
just real quick, I'll let you respond. $5 from My Listening Library YouTube to say, the real problem is a new game called Crimson Desert. Buy it if you want a higher chance of getting rid of that annoying partner that just won't leave. Thank you for the $5. And I am sure that we will one day get to meet Lactoid's vast binder full of women, but you can't
Billions.
today because they live in another city. He would be happy to introduce you to these women, but they're in Canada, okay? So,
She doesn't even
they
go
go to
here.
another school. They totally exist. They're totally real. You just can't ever meet them or know about them. But go ahead. Yeah.
so I don't have his extensive connection to women, but I do read a lot of divorce statements. I do read a lot of marriage counseling um, releases, and you go through a lot of them. You start understanding that, sure, even if women have a higher state of neuroticism, just like men have a higher state of aggression, um, society has moved to not reward aggression as much. So for men, as they're getting into more and more societies that aren't rewarding aggression as much, you start seeing them become less and less aggressive. Societies that reward aggression more, you see violence go up, which is why I would point to which is why I was very specific about the suicide rates of like Asian community or certain Asian areas where you look at the crime rates of um, like other places, especially when you're dealing with poverty. But what I am arguing is that our society is not adapting to the changes because biology can be changed over time. Now, granted, you can't change it tomorrow, but you can change it over time. And what needs to happen now
Hold on. What do you
is
mean by that? What do you mean that biology can be changed over time? Can you elaborate on that specifically? What do you mean?
so, for example,
Turn the friggin' frogs gay.
no, but but actually, no and yes. So, for example, just like I said with crime and violence and stuff like that, as a society starts frowning more upon violent people, it doesn't mean violence ends. It does mean fewer and fewer people see violence as a positive reinforcement to be able to grow or succeed in life, so they become less and less violent. They start moving into other ways of being able to succeed. Just like how for women, for a long period of time, it was seen as, you don't have to be, you don't have to be the person to, possibly lead in certain
Yeah, but
situations or
that
be
is
the
that
fun.
changing biology? That just seems to be changing culture.
Well, it changes with like it changes culture. And what I'm saying is when he keeps pointing
Okay,
to
so what you
biologies,
meant was culture. That's fair.
yeah.
But when
Well,
you say biology,
he's
I just that
no,
just like I don't know.
he's arguing biology as if it's this like solid structure that cannot be changed. And no, it changes with environment. And over time, if the environment um stops pushing the ideas of certain things being acceptable, fewer and fewer people do it. So as we get into the idea of like, hey, more and more relationships of the past were seen as women were seen as secondary people who the man would just work to try to make the woman happy. As we get more and more into societies where women are more productive in the society, um, now it should be more mutual to where men have to start being more vocal as to other aspects of the relationship that they want, and not just these are certain things that misogyny told me that I want and need. And women have to start taking on the roles of like, hey, maybe I should start being the initiator, maybe I should start being certain other parts of the roles that they um weren't pushed at a time prior to now. So that's why I'm saying like this misogynistic outlook, unless you want to completely like take women out of the workforce and put them back in the kitchen, um unless you want to make that change, the push has to be more towards, okay, now that you're, working in the workforce and doing more things, you're going to have to stop having a relationship where you feel like everything has to bend to your wants and needs. You have to be a mutual participant in a relationship.
Yeah, look, if this is just about how do we stop all these women from being so entitled, I mean, look, brother, I'm not too far away. Um,
That's not what
sure,
okay.
well, I mean, that's the way I'm interpreting it. So yeah, um, if you have if some feminist, right, who's insisting, I am woman, hear me roar, look at me, I make so much money, I'm a coder, blah blah blah. 100%. Yeah, 100%. I think it's fine to say, well, look, you're fine with all this. You better pay your half when we go out to eat. Reasonable, reasonable. But on the other hand, I don't think there's any problem actually, and I think it'd be better generally if we moved more towards this understanding, where there is some gender role within society, right? There is this understanding of, hey, you marry a woman, she is going to take on the task of child rearing and childbirth and all that, and that's fucking hard because it sucks, 100%, right? And as part of that, there's going to be some expectations on you as the other partner in the relationship to provide and to feed the family and to be a fatherly role, and that she can be a motherly role. I think there's sort of, I think, implicit here, whether you mean it or not. I think there's implicit here a sort of rejection of, or maybe explicit. I think you talk about tradition being part of misogyny here. I think there's an explicit rejection of tradition. I think there's an explicit rejection of the family unit to some degree, where you have these roles that exist in the family unit, and then you have children that come out of that. I think that's generally a good thing. I think that yes, there have been absolutely been improvements that we've made that were obvious since the 1950s and stuff. But I think that in many regards as well, we've declined since those times as well when
Hold
it
on, just
comes
out of
to
curiosity,
understanding.
Lactoid, in what way have we declined since the 50s? In what way do you think that we as a society, as a culture, should go back
Hmm.
to the 50s rather
That's what I'm saying.
than today?
Well, it's just what I was saying. Like, I think it's fine to have like some understanding of gender roles within society. First and foremost, I think that there should be much more emphasis on getting out and meeting people in person. And
Wait,
I know it's hilarious that I'm saying this on a Twitch panel. Sure,
before you
you
go
can
any
laugh about
further,
the irony.
I do have to pause you for a second. Before you go any further,
Hmm.
when I was specifically talking about gender roles, did I say every single possible gender role should be eliminated?
I think
Or
the
was it
ones that I'm referring to, you're calling misogynistic.
which? Because the ones that I said when I said traditional gender roles, I said when it matches up with the other four. So, like, when it matches up with the misogynistic worldview, that should be eliminated. But that doesn't mean that like men can't be protectors or men can't be.
Wait a minute.
What that means is when you put all four of those when you create a society where all four of those work in tandem, it creates a society where women are more afraid of men. That's why we got to the violence part of it, to the hatred part of it, because women are more saying, "Hey, men are more capable of harmful violence." It's going to make us more adverse to it because misogyny has that idea. But I said that that was the easiest one to dismantle. Then you said it side by side with the aversion, the men that now that they're like, "Hey, we're not the violent ones, but we're being treated like it." More and more men are more less likely to be able to interact with women, which leads to fewer and fewer interactions. When you have fewer and fewer interactions between men and women on a normal scale, you have fewer and fewer chance for people that have higher compatibility of being able to be with each other. Then you get to the traditional roles, which doesn't mean every single traditional role needs to be eliminated. What it does mean is when you are in a relationship, sometimes when you base it off of what people are capable of bringing to the relationship, you shouldn't try to automatically make a traditional situation in every single aspect when certain aspects are not traditional. Then, when you get to the male dominated, that connects also to the traditional values, that's where like if you are not the one that is, I guess, the more capable or the smarter or anything else, a lot of men have trouble taking a back seat to women in that situation. And a lot of women who probably do have the ability to be more dominant in certain situations take a step back, believing that that is what their role is supposed to be. So
Do
it's
you think?
all
Hold on,
four of
just real
those
quick,
working together.
Lactoid. Do you think it's gay to take the back seat, right, so to speak, in a relationship?
Of course.
Okay, noted. What about you? Dialogue always. Is it gay
No.
to take a? Are you less of a man if you take the back seat in a relationship?
If you're picking up your responsibilities in the parts where you're strong at, it shouldn't be seen as gay for taking a back seat to other things. So like if you aren't the breadwinner, if like your job is making considerably less than hers, you shouldn't feel like you should be the one to like make all the financial decisions. Maybe she's better at the accounting than you. And if she's a better accountant, she probably should control the pocketbook more than you should.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. So we're talking about if somebody has a specific skill. But I'm saying that like I don't part of masculinity I think is being assertive and taking control of situations where you feel like like its control is needed and then directing it towards some kind of positive outcome, right? If we're going to femininity and masculinity obviously exist as concepts, and I don't think there's necessarily a problem with either of them. I think that they both exist in tandem to in society, and I think it's fine. I mean, I don't know. I don't think there's anything wrong, and I'm sure you're going to say yes to this and agree with me. I don't think there's anything wrong with masculinity, but very specifically, I don't see there to be anything wrong with like emphasizing masculinity amongst men. I don't see why that's a problem if the role calls for it, which I think it does in many
Yeah,
respects.
but
Yeah,
to
but
be
I didn't say
clear,
masculinity. I specifically said misogyny.
yeah, just on that,
No, I know.
Lactoid, like,
That was more
would
a
you?
response to Wick.
Sure. But would you just cede, or maybe you wouldn't, that at least in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, we have seen an uptick in not just a praise of masculinity, but a denigration of femininity. And we see this even in the insult. Do you think it's, man, that guy's so gay, right, for behaving in this manner, right? And you see
It's
this
not
especially
anywhere where it
online
used to
with like
be.
things like Andrew Tate, right? A lot of the manosphere influencers and things like that, they denigrate femininity to a very big degree. They blame women for all the problems that a man has. And you see this like
Hmm.
all the time in the manosphere red pill space.
Hell, I would
Yeah,
take this a step further. If you even look at why many of the male dominated roles are losing less than, or are significantly undervalued, That is not because of women. That is significantly because of men. Men have made the decisions to devalue these roles. I've heard more and more often, like, hey, a trained monkey can do your job, so why pay you enough to survive? That's not really coming from women. That's coming from men. That's coming from the misogynist view. And for decades, men have certain men have been arguing to pay other men less and less and less to do male dominated roles. And women in female dominated roles, to their credit, are not saying that. Women are, if you would argue in certain things, are overvaluing their roles, but they fight to overvalue their roles. Men are the ones that are constantly going, hey, that factory worker shouldn't be paid that much. Hey, that factory worker shouldn't have paternal leave. Hey, that factory worker should only have a certain amount of vacation days. Men have created that society where men are undervalued in male roles. But it's funny because when we make the argument of like when a woman says, hey, we're not making as much as men, we show some man, you know, doing one of the most difficult jobs in America, but never questioning why that job is being paid less than the female role.
$5. Now you can answer both questions, Lactoid, right? $5 from Sifu Kung Fu Joe to ask if the man in the house had the final say on the important decisions, wouldn't there be less to fight over due to misogyny being the norm? Go ahead.
No, yes, there's some truth to if you have an established hierarchy going into it, then there's not going to be as much power conflict. There's not going to be much power struggle, right? There's not going to be a constant civil war within a relationship. No, whether or not you think that's good for other reasons, maybe you think it's bad for other reasons, but that at least does, I think, eliminate that one particular problem with the relationship. Wick, please remind me, what was your question? Just say the
Well,
first couple
this is
words of it
this is
for me.
well, my question or his, like they're different.
Your question, and then I'll
Well,
come to
my
me. Just
my
the first
question
couple words.
is wouldn't we see that at least in the last 5 to 10 years we've seen a huge
Yeah,
uptick,
yeah,
especially
yeah.
online and red
Sure.
pill,
Yes,
manosphere,
yes.
women
I remember the question.
hating, etc.
Sure. So you see, this has become, I think, very visible. You see some influencers like this that have made ground on social media, but overall, I think it's fair to characterize this as more of a death scream
It's a
of
counterculture movement, right?
it's a bit of a counterculture movement, but it's representing it's a bump in what is a tremendous amount of lost ground for all misogynists everywhere. If you go back to the 1950s, and there are survey after survey that proves this, actual attitudes towards women that are like considered to be sexist or misogynistic are consistently lower today than they were going back 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And yeah, you can also point to people like Andrew Tate and some other red pillars that are also super homophobic. That's fair enough. But once again, I think it's important that we don't get wrapped up in that, to not acknowledge that
Well,
how
sure.
much they've lost ground. I
There,
mean, Obama was against gay marriage in his first term.
yeah.
I mean, this was back in what,
I
2008.
understand. I understand, and we're not talking about homophobia here specifically, but when we talk about
I know, it
misogyny,
was an
like
example.
I get you. Like I think that you have a point with the general population, right? Like this
Hmm.
generic average normie guy, but when it comes to those who are in positions of power and influence, I don't know if that ground has changed as much as you would be suggesting.
Oh, I think so. I think so. I think this is just like indisputably true. Look at the rate of women CEOs. Look at the rate of business leaders becoming women generally. Look at politicians becoming women. It becomes more and more every year. Look at the positions of sexist attitudes that are acceptable amongst the male politicians. Like that becomes more and more like excluded and niche every single year. I mean, if you go back to the early thousands, you can
Hold
find
on,
plenty
no,
of examples of.
I just saw politicians, influencers, and podcasters arguing about body counts from lower bobbit and whether
Yeah,
some guy has a micro penis, right? These aren't like
I'm sure you're
exactly.
gonna. Yeah, I'm sure you're going to find examples. This is what I'm saying. You are going to be able to find examples like Andrew Tate. You are going to be able to find examples of, fucking, what is his name? Oglis from fucking Ogleys or whatever from
I don't know
Tennessee,
his name.
where they are on social media and they are saying stuff that harkens back to like the 1970s, 1980s, right? You're going to see that. I'm not denying that those people exist. What I'm saying is that we're looking and this is, I think I even conceded at the very beginning of this discussion that are you going to be able to find some very particular people who hold these beliefs
Sure.
and do this shit?
Well,
Of course you're going to be able to find this.
my point
But
isn't
on
that we
general,
haven't
this is not what's
reduced.
happening.
Sure. My point isn't it hasn't reduced, and I just agree. But I think that you're
Yeah.
overselling the rate at which it was. But just to give it the ball to Dialogue Always. Dialogue Always, that super chat apparently was meant for you. And I'll read it again, and you can respond to it. If the man in the house had the final say on the important decisions, wouldn't there be less to fight over due to misogyny being the norm? And that was
No,
addressed to you, and he wants you to address
absolutely
it.
not. I think the reason why a lot more divorces are happening now is because there's a structure where um, the idea and the belief is the man is supposed to have all the decisions, but connecting that to the freedom that women now have, women are more likely to, one, want the man to lead, but two, if the man isn't leading in the way that she wants him to lead, immediately leave because she has the freedom to lead.
Mm.
So the idea of
So not leading.
So I guess my problem
Lead
with
me
your
in the way
argument,
I want you to lead me. That's
just real
not leading
quick,
you.
my
yeah, but that's
problem with your argument overall, Dialogue Always, and maybe you can address my concern here, is as much as it might be the fault of misogyny and misogynistic structures for failing to teach young men how to navigate a modern dating environment or modern relationship environment, if you are going to put the onus upon misogyny for failing to teach young men this, you also have to put the onus on things like feminism for also failing to teach young men how to do this. Like, because young men have, by and large, they are failing in many ways to navigate this environment. And it's, I struggle to see it as misogyny alone and more
the
of a general failure of culture across the board.
problem I have with that is, one, feminism doesn't, it's not even going to address that. They're not going to. The only thing feminism is supposed to address is, giving women a bigger say in society. If that means financial, if that means vocal or anything else. Feminism doesn't really, I mean, fourth wave tries to, but most feminism doesn't really try to get into how a relationship structure is supposed to be. Misogyny specifically tried to dictate how a relationship structure is supposed to be. And unfortunately, misogyny also created that in the idea of any other structure is seen as less so or devalued. Where feminism doesn't really do the, hey, this structure is better than any other structure or this structure is less than any other structure. They just argue what they want in a society, which is completely different.
I may just disagree with your definition of feminism, frankly. Psychonaut for $10 to say, Wick, the fact that Tate and others like him are seen as so egregious is cause the temperature has gone down on misogyny. If it was the same as the past, it would be the norm. And just to address that real quick, yes, obviously, there's the temperature on misogyny, and the draw towards misogyny and misogyny as a whole is less than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, etc., right? But that's not my point. My argument against Lactoid is I think he's overselling the amount it has gone down. Like, we can agree that it has gone down, and I would say that it's still a force, and it, in certain circles, is growing. But to address your point, Dialogue Always, right? When you say things like, I don't think that feminism tries to address this except for maybe in fourth wave feminism, I don't know if I necessarily agree. I think that feminism tries to deal with the idea that women are also people, right? And deserving of the same responsibilities that people have and the same benefits that are given to men. But that would include how to navigate relationships, right? That would include how to navigate not just the workplace environment, but like the home environment and all these other places. And feminism isn't just an ideology for women; it's an
No, no.
ideology for everyone.
And
And
that's why I
again,
specifically said,
and I'll let you respond as soon as I'm done here. But like, again, I think that it has failed just as misogyny has, just as patriarchy has, just as all these other ideologies has. Every ideology has failed our young men. It has
What I
failed them.
what I said the difference is with feminism, like very specifically, feminism doesn't dictate terms. Misogyny does. Feminism gives suggestions which are bad and good and whatever else, but feminism doesn't dictate terms.
You don't think it does?
No, it doesn't. Misogyny specifically dictates terms, what the role of the man is supposed to be, what the role of the woman is supposed to be, how relationships are supposed to be structured, how introductions are supposed to be given, what a man is supposed to be seen as, what a woman is supposed to be seen as. Those are all dictated by misogynistic views. Feminism has multiple different arguments of like what they think might work. None of them are this is how. There's no like singular feminist one structure fits all argument where misogyny has a one structure fits
No,
all argument.
look, if you want to break it down like that, there are many flavors of patriarchy, misogyny, etc., that all are arguing with amongst each other. You can look at the red pill space; they're constantly infighting about what basically is the way to go about things and what they want overall in general. Some want the vote taken away from women entirely. Some do not, right? There are different flavors of that. So if you're
The
going to
main
say
elements
that
are all the same.
feminism has different flavors of feminism, yes, that's exactly correct, but it's not, it's not fundamentally different
I don't
from the
know
ideas of
because the main
anti-feminism.
elements
And
of misogyny are all the same. The main elements. You can argue how to get there, and that's how they argue.
I don't
But
I don't agree. I don't
okay,
agree that all the like misogyny
you name
manifests in very
you name a
different ways
single
at very different
misogynist.
times and in very different areas. And there are some people who are it's just like racism or any other thing, right? Like it isn't just one form, and you can argue that the core concepts are similar and fair enough,
So
but I think how it manifests absolutely matters in
yeah,
a
but I'm not
real way.
arguing how it manifests. I'm arguing the core concepts. The core concepts of a feminist worldview can be anything from a man leading, but this is how I like. I would like to also not be beat in this, but in a man-led society, I would like this, where misogyny is purely these four things: hatred, aversion, traditional values, and male dominance.
See, I think you could
None
have
of
misogyny without traditional values, but $100, and I'm going to get to this before I get to any of y'all arguments. $100 from Audacity to say misogyny is a natural evolution of males to protect the weaker aspect of something they are forced to share their existence with and be responsible for the protection of, like the natural instinct to scold a child or explain to them why they shouldn't touch a hot stove. Thank you for the $100. And then
smash the
$5
movie,
from
not misogyny.
Alishness to say Lactoid is in the back seat of the Uber saying, "This is gay. Allow me to be the one driving," as he forcefully makes the Uber driver sit in the trunk. Thank you
That's
for the
why I don't
hundred
take
dollars,
Ubers.
and thank you for the $5. I do appreciate that. But like just the concept of traditional roles. I, I know this isn't me and you debating, right? But I challenge that
Mhm.
as a core concept of misogyny. I think I can be misogynistic towards women and not do it through the lens of traditional roles or even have a belief in traditional roles. I can hate women while believing that women, right, should have any role they want, traditional or otherwise. I can still hate women with the best of them. I promise you I can.
So when you say traditional roles, I'm just trying to make sure to understand this. Are you
Just
talking
watch him.
specifically? Are you
He'll do
talking
it.
specifically about Christian traditional roles or traditional roles
American traditional
regardless
roles,
of?
Western culture,
Well,
the
well,
traditional roles that the man should be the breadwinner,
that's
the woman should raise the family, the woman should um, be the one who stays at home. When I think of traditional roles in a relationship, which is the context of what we're talking about, traditional roles, I think of the stay-at-home mom who stays at home with the children, raises them, rears them, teaches them, and the man who goes out and wins money for the family and protects them from harm and that kind of thing. Am I incorrect?
not kind of if we reduce it down to like American Western Christian values, but if we're talking about traditional roles in just tradition, regardless of what relationship you're in, um, men act regarding to their tradition, not regarding to just one singular
No, sure.
Western
I
tradition. So
can
when I
get
say
with you that
traditional rules,
yeah, I can get
I'm
with you
saying
that
that
there are
they're
multiple traditions in the world that have had various places for the genders in them. But
yeah,
I
and
would
they
argue that even if I said who
misogynist
cares
moves to
about
that tradition.
tradition, women still suck. Like that there are plenty of people I know who are very egalitarian when it comes to what a woman's place should be in the workplace and at home and etc. But they still treat women pretty shitty because they don't like women.
So, for example, if you see a relationship where the man is like, I get to do whatever the heck I want to, but you have to stay specifically at home, or not just at home, but you have to do what I tell you to do. Do you see that as a traditional role?
Well, yeah, that is a traditional role, yeah.
Okay, so almost every single, I would even argue every single masculine argument is some form of that. Even if it is like, hey, the woman's at work while I sit at home and do nothing, it's still seen as push comes to shove. At the end of the day, I'm the one that makes the decisions here,
So
even if the person is an absolute useless individual.
yeah, but I think that you can like do you know what MGTOW is?
Yeah.
Yeah, men who go their own way.
Mhm.
Do you consider them misogynists?
No, I mean
No,
they can be, but no,
I do. I think that
no,
that is kind of a fundamentally misogynistic worldview. Um, Now,
no,
to be
it's
clear,
not.
my
It
view on
can be.
misogyny is it's not always bad. like just like misandry isn't always a bad thing. Like
No,
sometimes you should hate men. Sometimes you
it
should
can
hate
be. So
women, depending on what they do, right? But like this idea that men who men think that women have zero value in their lives or negative value in their lives, and so they don't care what they do, but they're going to do it somewhere away from them. That
and
is, I
that's
think, a fundamentally misogynistic worldview.
and I don't think it's misogynist because it's genuinely seen as like a lot of them, regardless of what the women do, they just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah,
And so
because they
that
believe that women either have no value or negative value.
sure, but that's still not exactly misogyny.
It's
It's
seeing
not
as
like
women as
it's
less than.
no, no, it's seen as just not wanting to be around them. It's not being less or more. Now, this
Okay,
I'm
well,
saying this because I've heard no, I've heard a lot of MGTOW talk, and a lot of MGTOW is like, yeah, it's not even about whether or not I like women or hate women or anything else like that. It's more along the lines of like, because again, men going their own way, seen as just like I don't want to have to lean on traditional values. It's kind of like the 4B movement
yeah, but hold
in
on.
Korea.
Like, just
It's the
because they
exact opposite
say
of the
they're not
4B movement.
misogynist doesn't mean they're not misogynist, right?
I
Just
don't know.
because they say, well, I don't
I
have
didn't.
any problem with the gays, I just think that they shouldn't be messing with traditional marriage like that. Like,
But
okay, brother.
wait. But
Like,
you made it. You made an argument of I don't have a problem with the gays, but I don't think gays should be doing X, which is completely different from I don't have a problem with women, so I just don't
that
interact with
yes,
them.
but that was to illustrate that someone can say one thing but mean another. It wasn't illustrating I wasn't trying to draw a similarity in what they were saying in that manner. So when it comes to like, for example, saying MGTOW, as I understand it, are people who believe that they don't need women or that women have hurt them enough and they don't want them around. Like women are a negative value in their life, and so they don't want to be around them. That sees women as less than, right?
No, so out of your two examples, one isn't, two is. So your second example is definitely misogynist, but your first example of just I don't want to deal with a relationship, that is not
Okay, it's not just not wanting to deal with a relationship; it's not wanting to deal with
a
women.
lot of them are. Some of them, again, like, that's why I said it depends on it depends on who you're talking to, but not in essence is it
Okay,
misogynistic.
I
It
just
can
disagree.
be, but it's not always.
I just disagree. But go ahead, Lactoid. I feel like I'm taking your spot here, and I don't mean to.
No, you're fine. No, you're fine. I mean, look, I agree with Lick. Sometimes misogyny is okay. Now, very very true and base statement that is. I think maybe the hiccup in this whole discussion has been just very fundamental. We don't agree on terms. I think that your definition of misogyny is, I think, probably not shared by myself, Wick, or I think most people. generally speaking, when we're talking about misogyny, we're not talking about like a four element thing in which all four elements have to be hit in order for this to be misogyny. We're talking about kind of in a similar way we would refer to like racism, where it's this it can be explicit hatred or ingrained prejudice towards somebody based on this, right? Like, yeah, if you said I don't want to hang around black people anymore because they're black people, I think this would be a prejudice statement. I think it'd be fair to call this racist. In the same way that if you were to say I just don't want to be around women anymore, um, I think it'd be fair to say this indicates some kind of prejudice. This would indicate some kind of misogynistic beliefs. Again, not necessarily that it's bad in that context all the time, but I think it would be fair to say that it characterizes that. I don't think you have to go through this four-part definition that's been constructed here, where like, oh, like, do they not want to be around women because of some kind of traditional values or some kind of hatred, aversion? Is obviously clearly there, um, but yeah, I think that's probably where our main disagreement is. Um, and I think that's I think the struggle, which is I think you've come in with this very like kind of bold statement of misogyny is responsible for modern relationship problems, and then when I'm trying to grapple with it, or when we're trying to grapple with it, from just from our understanding, I think a society's understanding of what misogyny is, it doesn't seem to make it doesn't seem to fit within the structure that you're giving us. So I guess the first, I'll just start with this, like, why, and maybe I should have started with this a while ago, like, why should we accept your four-part definition of misogyny? Like, why is this superior to just describing misogyny as ingrained prejudice or outward aggression towards women or something along these lines?
Because if we're talking specifically about how it damages relationships, it's the four part. If it's, again, you can talk about misogyny in a bubble and talk about how certain elements don't have to be involved in misogyny for it to still be misogyny. But if we're talking about how specifically relationships today are having multiple issues, all four things will have to work in tandem for that to show why, one, so many women are walking away, even in marriages where it seems like the structure was pretty solid or whatever else. When you start looking more and more at, like, when they go to not just divorces, but when they start going to marriage counseling and relationship counseling and stuff like that, that's where you start noticing that all four work in tandem specifically for relationships between men and women. So that's where I'm talking about misogyny as a problem. You could find misogyny in other bubble arguments where it doesn't have all four, but in this particular one, yes.
So, so you're saying that misogyny is the root of relationship problems
Today.
when misogyny is defined as this thing as it applies to relationship problems. It would seem to me that you just sort of structured the argument to be tautologically true. Like, it's unfalsifiable at that point. If you're saying misogyny is obviously the root of all relationship problems, and then I ask you, well, we don't agree. We think, why should we accept this definition that you provided? You said, well, this definition is how is misogyny applied to relationship problems.
Yeah, and if I had just said that, sure, but we've been here for about 2 hours, and I was laying out why each element works inside of a relationship to damage the relationship, especially by each person's role in it. So all four of those have to work together in the sense um like how we described. I don't want to have to go. Well, I can. I have time,
No, no,
but
no, no. So, but the problem isn't that you haven't said what you said about them. The problem is, like, it seemed like, going off Wick's example. Let's say you have somebody who just meets the aversion. They just meet the aversion, like a classical, like, MGTOW person. Wouldn't you agree this might be a root cause of a relationship problem if they are averse to women?
I don't. Wait. So are you saying, like, in this particular relationship, the
Mm-hmm.
only thing he has is just an aversion to women, and that's the
Yeah.
only thing he has?
Yep. Could that be
Okay.
a problem in the relationship?
It can be, but that doesn't exactly go against what I said. But but to point out, you can have an aversion, and if you're also denying the traditional role aspect of it, if she's denying the male dominance aspect of it, if she's denying the traditional role aspect of it, she can work to help nullify that aversion and work through it. But if both people have the idea of, in a male dominated role, she doesn't feel she has to pick up the responsibility to cover whatever he feels adverse about, and he feels that, I'm adverse, so I'm not picking up my role that I feel I'm supposed to have in male domination, then at the end of that fucking relation, wow, I almost swore. I'm sorry. At the end of that
You can
relationship,
swear
Fucking
here.
swearing. Why are you
I
fucking swearing my fucking channel? You fuck.
I
Okay. Anyway,
apologize. At
but
the at
finish.
the end at the end, that's what's going to destroy the relationship, is that she doesn't pick up that side of it either. So the misogyny isn't just what he does, it's also what she does.
Okay. So just to be clear, we are coming up on the 2 hour mark, and I want to give you guys a chance to have your closing statements. I would like to do open call-ins after the closing statements, though, if you guys are both okay with that.
I might have to bounce, but I think
Fair enough.
Dialogue is the one who really has, I guess, the kind of proprietary thesis here. So I think he's probably going to get most of the
Sure.
questions.
Sure.
So if just to let my audience know, if you want to call in, jump backstage, and I can pull you in. You can question, and either for me, Lactoid if he stays, Dialogue if he's here, right? It's up to you. And if you've enjoyed the show, give me money, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, all that's good. Got some great shows coming up. Tomorrow's going to be Collins, and then Thursday we're going to have what is allowed to protect liberalism? Are we allowed to be illiberal to protect liberalism? We've got some great guests for that. We got Ryan Getty coming on. We got Hutch. We got Dev. We got Stormwolf. It should be a great show. Tune in for that. But I want to give closing statements to each of these lovely gentlemen, and you can shout yourself out. I have links to their channels or their Twitters in my YouTube description. Give them a follow. Give them a sub. All that. Let's get the mic first to Mr. Lactoid, and then we'll give it to Dialogue Always. Go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to take a little bit of time here. So the first thing I want to point out is that Wick did a poll as to who is responsible for more problems within society, and the poll came back. The Democratic selection here was that women are. So I think this is a
Just to be clear,
major
with 40
blow.
votes in, it's 50-50.
No, it's not.
I'm
It
looking
closed
at it right
already.
now.
Shit. Okay, well, that's rigging. We should have stopped the count before, obviously.
Okay,
So at the time
go
that I said
ahead.
it, which is the most relevant part when I said it, okay, when it was the real vote, women were clearly in the lead in terms of being responsible for most of the problems. So I think this is a major blow in Dialogue Always is theory. I think it it's pretty brutal. But in all seriousness, I appreciate, as always, I appreciate when somebody kind of has a theory and they want to have it challenged, and I appreciate you talking with me. I appreciate Wick for putting this up, and I really do. I think it was a good discussion. It was a civil discussion. That's all great and dandy. Just on the substance of it, though, I mean, I'm very much unconvinced. I don't. You've had responses for a lot of the things that I've said, or a lot of the points that I brought up, and a lot of the retorts that I've presented, but I haven't felt as though the responses were super convincing, or that in some cases they seemed super on point in terms of the problem I was trying to identify. I am not convinced that misogyny is responsible for all of, sorry, the root of relationship problems. I think that relationship problems are multivariate, complex. There's a lot of different reasons that a lot of different relationships can fail, can struggle. And it would seem to me, once again, I think this is just the point I'm going to reiterate, is that under the common understanding of what misogyny is, misogynistic attitudes just have objectively declined considerably if we go back to the 1950s. It is simply the case. And when you look at like objective metrics in terms of laws being passed, stats of women getting in certain roles, all this stuff, and yet you see objective metrics of relationships being worse in terms of higher divorce rates, even when you have no fault divorce, when you have lower satisfaction in not only marriages, which you do see, and you actually see higher levels of satisfaction in religious marriages that emphasize kind of a patriarchal hierarchy. You actually see higher rates of satisfaction in those relationships and marriages than in the alternative. And because we're having a lot more of those alternative relationships, I think, going on, you're seeing less satisfaction there. And you're seeing a lot of just other factors that are coming in unrelated to this. Less satisfaction with life generally because of increases of mental health issues, which is a big problem. The last thing I'll say here, I think, while I would agree that misogyny in many ways has manifested itself as terrible things that obviously should have been gotten away with, and it's a good thing that they have been gotten away with in many cases. I think there are many cases in which feminism has gone way too far, and this sort of pathological opposition to male authority from some women, I think, has denigrated a lot of, I think, structures of society that we're sort of seeing now actually held benefit. We're seeing, like I said, relationship satisfaction declining dramatically, fertility rates crashing. I think that these are problems, and I think that at some point we're going to have a reckoning on how to solve these problems. And I don't know if we're going to be able to do it, but I think gender roles are a-okay, perfectly fine to have different expectations of your partner. Got no problem with that. Just obviously be nice about it.
Be nice about it. Thanks, Lactoid, for being here. I got a link to his channel as always. You can find him at Lactoid TV on Twitch and YouTube. Give him a follow. He's a great guy, even though he's wrong half the time. Well, maybe not half, but he's wrong sometimes and he's right sometimes. But we love him all the time. Okay. Give it to Dialogue always. Go ahead. What's your outro?
So, from my opening argument, I made the statement that misogyny has four elements to it when talking about this specific topic: hatred, aversion, traditional roles, and male dominance. What I did not make, and the statement that I want to make sure it is very clear, is that men are the only people capable of this, or that men's actions are the only things that are the reason for this. I want to make sure that there's a very clear difference between misogyny, misogynistic attitudes, and misogynistic beliefs, and what men do. I genuinely want to establish that, because what I am saying is that over time, there has been massive changes in the way that our society functions. And while our society is starting to change in multiple different ways that are unprecedented, just like the rest of history has had unprecedented moments. This is a very unprecedented thing, which means nothing before this has happened before. We do not have a structure that is able to adapt. And the problem is misogyny actively fights against that adaptation. So why I say that misogyny is the root of it is because both men and women are picking I guess, the easier parts of misogyny and stepping away from the more difficult parts of relationships, which is leading to more and more collapse of interactions between men and women. It's one of the causes for the higher divorce rates. It's one of the causes for the extreme decline in male income levels. It's the extreme rise in female income levels. Even the idea of women getting control of the child is based on the idea that women will be more likely to or better off taking care of the child, which is shown to be not exactly true in most cases. But that is because of a misogynistic worldview that a woman is better being, the child, or taking care of the child, when that's not always the case. And removing that removing that hard line stance on how traditional roles and everything, and the fourth elements that I've told you, that I've said about misogyny, removing that creates a situation where more and more people get into relationships where they need to define what their roles are, and they're not dictated by an outside ideology or outside source. Up till that day happens, we are going to have these problems over and over again, and they're going to get worse. That's my
Okay.
problem.
Thank you for being here, man. Where can people find you?
Like I said, I'm on X's dialogue always. I don't really have much else, so if you want to get a hold of me, you can talk to me there.
Check him out, gang. Thank you both for being here. Really appreciate you. I don't
Oh,
think we
so
have
also, I'm sorry.
anyone.
I have a spaces with that I do every once in a while. So every like Thursday or Wednesday night, I'll do a spaces if you want to
on
join.
X. Okay,
Yeah, if you
go
want to
check
join
him
and
out,
cuss
gang.
me out.
Check him out. Okay. With that, if you need to go, I understand. But we have a caller, a gentleman caller, who has some thoughts and he wants to come in, and I'm curious to see what he has to say. Hello, you're live.
If it wasn't Misogyny himself, we've been talking about you the whole time, man.
You're muted on your end, sir. Okay, there you go. You figured it out.
Hello, good people. How are you guys?
Okay, what you got for us? What did you want to call in for, sir?
Yeah, I submitted a super chat earlier and I didn't hear Mr. Dialogue answer it because it was like formed as a yes or no question. And then Wick, you didn't read my last super chat, so shame on you. But anyway, Mr.
That's on mine.
Dialogue.
Oh, Wick,
Mr.
Orthodox Christianity has not failed men at all. Me and my Ortho bros are happy, strong, and based. Glory to God. Thank you for the $5. So there you go.
Yes,
Sorry, I
very
didn't see
much.
it.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Wick. Yeah, so Mr. Dialogue always. So earlier I asked the super chat if well, I guess first I'll ask this: is it misogyny for? Is it my misogynistic belief to believe that I should have the final say in my home when it comes to important things? Like even voting.
It can be. I mean, like
Well,
the misogynistic belief is the belief that there's no other possible situation for anybody else to have a relationship that might be different from yours. But you, if she agrees to it, can believe whatever you want to believe inside the confines of your own relationship.
yeah, well, that my belief is that the other forms of relationships are dysfunctional, and that's why we're seeing like fallout from it that we didn't back when traditional relationships were more prevalent. You know, so they were when we were more traditional, more Christian. That was the structure, and it seemed to work out fine. But is that structure misogyny by your definition?
Well, demanding it of others, yes.
Demanding it, what does that mean?
Which means, so while your relationship structure might be suitable and good for you, it might not be suitable for everybody else. And demanding that every single person gets into a relationship based on how you perceive that relationship to work in an element where the woman is just as capable of being able to establish herself as the men, that's doomed for failure for a lot of people. May not be for you, but for a lot of people.
Okay, but I guess I would have to ask, like, where is this thing that you're claiming is misogynist, like saying that nobody else can have a different relationship? Like, where's that coming from?
Well, that's when I asked you. I said, if you're talking about how you want your structure to work, if you get with somebody that agrees to that structure, then no, it's not misogyny. You both agreed to it. But if you're demanding that um, other people that might not like have the same structure as you do move into your structure, and that's the way that it should work, then no, that's not going to
Well,
work.
okay, well, here's a different question. Like, why ought we not support and why not we support that form of relationship over the other relationship forms? Since we have like a birth rate crisis, maybe something to do would be to give, I don't know, more incentives toward heterosexual couples that produce children and make that, a priority above, any other type of relationship.
You can support whatever you want to support. You can't demand, and misogyny is a demand by definition.
Well, isn't if we make things into law, isn't the law? Aren't we demanding people to obey the law?
Yeah, but I don't think there's any, unless you're talking about going to the structures where women cannot divorce or women stay in the home or something like that, then that's a demand and that's a misogynistic law. And I think even during the periods where women weren't allowed to leave, unless you're saying like these battered women were better off than the women of today, then no, like that structure was bad for a lot of people.
But it wasn't bad for birth rates. It wasn't bad for men and women's relationships. If you're looking at the context for the present as opposed to the past, but why would I mean? Here's one thing I argue all the time: is if we are unequal, right? Like if we have, let's say, an army, and you have the medic, but then you have the top brass, sergeant or general, why should, like, obviously you don't want them to have equal status when it comes to authority, right? There should be a chain of command. So, in a society where women cannot effectively fight war as men do, why should they be afforded the same rights as men if they cannot do the same things men can do?
Because hypothetical situations are not reality. We're never going to be in a war where men go to
Oh.
war with women. That's not going to happen. So the hypothetical is, if in a situation where men go to war with women, men would win, but we're not ever
No,
going
that's not what I'm asking. I'm saying if the country had to go to war,
against
like,
women.
men have to do the fighting because women aren't as effective at fighting in war as men are. You
And you're
agree with
talking
that, right?
you're talking about current warfare, right?
Armed conflict. Yeah. If
So
today we got drawn into an armed conflict where it necessitated the draft, women wouldn't be able to be drafted.
okay, but that's not true for all places. And also, like,
We're talking about America.
but no, the reason why I said that's not true for all places is easily change that law whenever, like, if we get it, say this war in Iran ends up expanding into, like China and Russia and everybody else gets involved. Eventually, women are going to have to fight that war. Regardless of how
Um,
powerful or how strong or everything else men are, women are going to have to fight that war alongside men.
That's not what the draft would include. They would not include women. They would draft all the fighting age men
At
first.
first.
The women would be like
first.
the bottom of the barrel. If we start picking women to fight, that's how we know that the war is going very bad for us.
Which is why situations like the USSR in the 1940s, or China during Japanese internment, started leaning more and more towards women fighting, because even if they're the weaker sex and everything else, when you're in a
Because
war,
you're
you're in
losing
a
and you're
war.
trying to draw on the last, like, defense you have. That's when
That's
you should just
Yeah, but
give up,
just
in
to
my
be
opinion.
clear,
that's
USSR won their conflict in the 40s, and China won their conflict, right, with Japan. Like,
yeah,
they won
because
by,
they got to that point
and
where
like the
everybody
Viet
had to
Cong,
fight.
for example, the Viet Cong against America. The Viet Cong had millions of women fighting alongside them, and yeah, they took a lot of losses, but they won. They beat us.
Whether or not women fight doesn't determine win or lose. Like that's not that
It
doesn't make any
determines our policy, and right now the policy is not that we draft women. The
because our
current
policy.
policy as it is, if we get called into like an emergency wartime where we need to start, conscribing people, it's going to be men. That
That's
is the
the
reality, and I feel
but that
like you're
is
not engaging with the reality of my question.
no, I'm not engaging with it because that is the advantage of having two oceans between us and the enemy in most situations. No,
So
but
you're
when you
just
have
ignoring that. You're just saying that, trust me, bro, it's never going to happen.
right
That's
now,
what your
no.
whole view is relying on.
Up until we end up having to fight a war where it actually
Uh-huh.
reaches our soil, yes, we send our fighting men over somewhere else to fight, but we have when it
Yes,
comes
correct.
to
So they should vote and women shouldn't.
it's ridiculous because again, when you're in a
How's that
situation,
ridiculous?
well, two reasons why. One reason why is because everybody, when you're losing, feels the effect of war,
Hold on, we're not
regardless.
talking about losing yet. We're talking about conscription. We get called into an emergency state of war. The law currently is that you conscribe the fighting age men. That is what
Yeah,
it is in this country. We're talking about this country. So, since that is the reality, and we men are the ones who are going to get drafted, why should women have any rights over us
you
or
don't
equal to us?
you don't think that at any time during World War
I don't
II,
know why you're
Germany
running from my question.
not. I'm directly addressing it. You don't think at any time during World War II, Germany thought that their
You're
women would
answering
have
my
to fight?
question with a question. That's not answering my question.
It is answering your question because
No, it's not, because you're asking me a question. Don't
the
ask me a question.
foolishness,
Answer my
the
question.
foolishness in this is believing that in
Okay, you're
every
just
single
being
situation,
incredulous. Just answer my question, please.
I'm answering your question. You just don't
No,
like
you're
my
not.
answer. You don't
You're
like my
asking
answer.
me a question. That's not
No,
an answer.
I'm telling you your question is nonsensical because America
Oh,
is the only country so far that hasn't had an invasion. So when we have a war, we just send our men out because we don't have to worry
that
about that.
doesn't mean an invasion cannot happen. That's a
But when it
fallacy.
but when it happens, what do we do?
It's exactly what's in the law right now. We conscribe the fighting age men.
And then what happens? When they're on our shore, what happens?
I just told you.
No, you didn't. You
We
lied.
start fighting. That's what
You lied.
happens.
When it reaches our shore, everybody
Yeah,
fights.
you start fighting.
Everybody fights.
No, not everybody. If
Yes.
women fighting could be more harm than good.
Hold on, just a quick question for you, Kung Fu Joe. So, say we are invaded by, I don't know, fucking China. Okay, so Chinese soldiers are walking our streets. Women in the neighborhood start sniping these guys. Do you take their guns away and refuse to let them fight for their country?
It depends. If they're giving away, positions or something, or they're giving away like hiding places for other civilians, then maybe that would be a bad thing.
Well,
But
they're all
if
ci-
they
ju-
were
just to be
under a
clear,
commander,
they're
they
all
could go and
civilians.
snipe
They
from
just
somewhere.
they just get a gun and they're like, "Fuck this! I'm gonna fight for my country." They go out and start shooting Chinese soldiers. Would you stop them
Well,
from doing
that's
that?
part of the reason we have a Second Amendment. If they want to do that, I don't think anyone's going to come stop them. The point here is we don't conscribe them through law into fighting. That's the difference.
Sure, but to
Because
your
we
question
haven't
of who
been
should vote, if women are more than willing to sacrifice their lives in certain situations, why not let them also have a say?
Well, having a say and being forcefully like conscribed because that's your agreement, like that's your contract with the country in exchange for voting, which men currently have. That is the situation I'm asking about. And all those other things are just kind of like red herrings because this is the central core argument that I'm
They're
presenting.
They're not red herrings. They're directly pointing out the flaw.
It is a red herring because it doesn't address the very specific thing that I'm describing, which is conscription as it is currently stated in our law. When men sign up to vote, that automatically puts them in, makes them vulnerable for being drafted if there should be a draft.
Yes, because
that is not the same for women, yet they have the same. Men have to give their lives. Why should women be able to vote for a president that might lead us into war if they cannot fight? That is the core argument that I'm asking.
My answer is the thing you refuse to engage with. And that is,
which is what?
When you make a decision to go to war and you start losing, everyone fights. So everyone.
Hold on. Do you make a decision to go to war every time, or sometimes is war a reaction to being attacked?
It's both.
No, sometimes it's one and sometimes it's the other.
That's what both.
You're only naming the case for one.
No, I'm naming the reason why one exists. Reason why men get conscripted but everybody votes is because if somebody makes a decision to go to war, which in almost every situation, there have been countries that have decided to invade other countries because men thought they were tough and bold and everything else, invaded a country, started getting their ass beat, and then you start seeing women having to fight in order to protect that land. So they should have the right to be able to make the decision whether or not they go and start something that they might have to not be able to finish.
No, that doesn't make sense because they're still not forcefully conscribed by our current laws into fighting. Should a president that let's say women describe it's on their vote alone that they select a president that leads us into war. Let's say more women vote, right? Because there's more women voting. So women determine who wins, or loses an election. And due to that, let's say we elect somebody who leads us into war or have some fumble where we're then like vulnerable. That means that women are responsible for leading us into war, but they're not responsible for fighting it. And that's my issue.
Yes,
if I may, Kung Fu Joe, if we change the law to include women in the draft, would you change your position here and be okay with women voting?
No, because women cannot.
So then your problem really isn't the draft; it's something else.
That they can't fight. No, if you want a draft is effective if you only recruit men.
Hold on.
I agree that it's effective if you only recruit men. You
can be drafted into non-combat positions.
Sure.
And these positions are crucial to winning war. Logistics wins wars, right? It's not just the people who are on the line, but the people who produce the ammo, the people who get that ammo, the people who drive the trucks, who get the supply chains, who
Right.
make sure
So
that
you
all
could
the,
right,
for
Wick.
example,
I've heard this
nurses,
argument
doctors,
before.
etc.,
I hear that you can.
a whole
It's
host of
true.
these things that women, even in
Yep.
your worldview, are perfectly capable of doing. And these are positions that they can be filled that aren't combat positions or not frontline positions.
Yep.
But they still can be drafted for that. So if
I understand that you can draft a bunch of women from their home kitchens into a giant kitchen, Wick. But the thing is that the men are being drafted specifically. Mostly men are, or almost exclusively men are going to be fighting on the front lines where you're more likely to die.
Okay, but
Okay,
if
so let
your
me ask you this.
argument,
Can I
if
just
your
ask him one
argument is
question?
that
My
women won't
argument
have
is, okay,
to-
yeah, you're going to draft. You don't need a draft to draft women into those positions. They're not going to go die. More of them are
Okay,
going to
but if your
volunteer
argument
like
is
they did
that-
in World War II.
But if your argument is that women won't have to bear the cost of getting into a war that a leader may or may not vote them into, and therefore they shouldn't have the privilege of being able to elect those leaders, then we simply change the law that allows them to bear the cost, just as a man does, of getting into these wars.
Wait,
Because
what's
these
that cost,
positions are still
Wick? Do you, the cost isn't the same. No, the cost that you're applying here isn't the same. You're like, well, they can go to a giant kitchen where their life
Yes,
isn't in danger.
men
And I'm
can
saying
also be
that's my
drafted
issue,
into
Wick.
non-combat positions where their life isn't in danger.
But the men are. All the men are exclusively going to be in the combat positions, mostly
Hold on.
because they are more effective at fighting in those combat positions than
Two-
women are.
Two things. I want to make sure that this is consistent. So, do you think 60-year-old overweight diabetic blind people should be allowed to vote? Like men should be allowed to vote?
Oh, I think a lot of men shouldn't be able to vote.
Okay, so your argument is for the only people allowed to vote are the people allowed to initiate conflict.
Actually, I never laid out to you who I think should be able to vote.
The
Yeah,
argument
to
you
be
made
clear,
for why women can't covers
Yes, that's
millions
different.
of men.
and to be clear, women have died in our current conflict in Iran, right? Like they have borne the cost just as men have.
Sure, but that doesn't make them better fighters than men.
You're
not talking about better
completely.
fighters.
I am, Wick. That's the thing. I
on.
agree
Hold
with
on,
the draft.
Do you
I
think
just
that the
don't
American
think that
military
it
is
should
stronger than the
include
Iranian
women.
military?
What?
Do you think that the American military is stronger than the Iranian military?
Maybe in brawn, but not in brains at the moment. I don't know.
Okay, come on. You got look. I
No,
understand that.
do you agree, Wick, that we were stronger than the Viet Cong?
Yes.
Okay, exactly, but
it
we still
doesn't-
lost
like,
that,
this,
didn't
this
we?
is why,
Why did
like,
we lose?
just because you're stronger doesn't mean you win. Like, first of all,
Why did we
I
lose?
know that.
Second of all, right?
Wait. Have them answer why we lost the Vietnam War, and that explains why women should be
It
allowed.
was because they had home field advantage. That is actually the best answer.
Because we came on their shore and attacked them, and they had no. Actually, they attacked South. They started the war.
Look, the Vietnam War was a civil war, right? It's a
North Vietnam started the war. We invaded them, started pushing them back all the way until they became the Viet Cong. The Viet Cong is everybody had to fight because they were invaded, which is the reason why when that initial war started and the men from North Vietnam decided to start that war because women weren't allowed to vote at that time. When they decided to start that war, everyone bared the cost. And at the end of it, because everyone bared the cost of that war, the United States lost.
Okay, and?
So that's the reason why women vote. Because at the end of the day, everyone bears the cost of war. Everyone. They might not.
So wait, hold on. Hold on. If the women who don't vote in the countries where women don't vote, they still have to do the fighting, right? So what happens if a country gets invaded and the women in that country aren't able to vote? Do they just, I'm not going to defend my country because I can't vote? Is that what they're going to do?
I'm going to finish this because war is not just about fighting. War is about the economics. War is about who works, who builds anything. War is about who changes the structure of America. War is about every single possible element. So when every single possible element gets affected by a political decision, every person should be allowed to make that decision.
Did women vote when we won the Civil War?
No.
No. Did we get a favorable outcome?
Who's we? No.
America?
Really, answer the
Yeah.
question. So, okay, both sides were America. Did Confederate women in Charlottesville have a favorable position to that? Even though they didn't decide that the Confederate Army to attack the Union Army. What happened when the Union members got drunk in that town?
What does what does this have to do with my question? What I'm presenting here is that you can still get your favorable outcome in warfare if you don't conscribe women into your
Favorable.
draft
Neither
or
of you,
whatever.
hold on. Neither of you are going to get favorable outcomes if I don't get more donations. So unless we get a little bit more money coming into chat, I'm going to close the discussion down.
Okay.
Men and women both can vote to keep this open through their pocketbooks. I do not disagree.
Yes, vote to Wick with your dollars.
Yes, unironically.
Because
Go ahead.
It was, by definition, it was not favorable for those Confederate women that weren't allowed to vote to get into that war.
I'm asking you if you do you think the outcome was favorable to the country overall?
The country overall didn't make that decision to go to war.
Was the outcome of the Civil War like favorable to the future of the country?
Sure, but that's not
Okay,
the
great.
argument
There
being
we go.
made.
We finally landed.
That's stupid. That's like saying was the wait, that's the absolute dumbest argument ever. That's
what
like
does
saying,
women being
that's like
included
saying-
have to do with anything that is fought for the good? This doesn't line up.
Wait. This is how ridiculous this argument is. Just like the Vietnam statement, was it favorable for the women of North Vietnam to have American soldiers in
I'm not
men in-
Vietnamese, sir.
Before you answer that, $5 from Audacity. Thank you for the $5. To say how much to let Joe openly espouse his ideal American caste system. First of all, I don't know if he has an ideal American caste system, but $50. And then 20, and then I'll let him give whatever caste system he wants. And then $20 from Robert Paulson to say women could vote when we won World War II. They were also in the army. This is so fucking dumb. Thank you for the $20.
They were in the army? Really? They were fighting on the front lines? That's crazy, bro.
Do you
I
not
must have
know
missed that in
war is
history
more than
class.
Who shoots at each other? Do you not understand that the war? Wow, you must be one of those people that talk about strategy but don't talk about like an army moves on its stomach. Have you ever heard that term before? The army moves on its stomach?
Yeah, I think I might have, yeah.
So what is that telling you? That's telling you that wars are not won based on who shoots at the other person. It's won on who can move the resources the best. And that includes every single person, regardless of race and gender.
Yeah, but this doesn't answer. I feel like my core argument is not getting addressed here because
hey Joe, can I
currently-
jump in just real quick, man?
Sure.
So unless
Mr.
you're fighting on the front lines, you don't get to have a vote. Is that what you're getting at?
I just don't see why you should. If you could vote for the person
So
who
like
could
all
put
the
you
men
on
that
the
were
front lines.
drafted, all the men that were drafted during Vietnam that worked in kitchens, supply lines, medics, all of that shit. Have you ever seen MASH? Like, do you fucking know anything?
Oh,
Like,
MASH,
so all those
right.
people,
MASH
those people
teaches
didn't have
me.
the right to vote because they weren't fighting on the front lines, including an enormous amount of women that were playing support roles and were just as subject to getting fucking bombed to oblivion in those support roles. Except they actually couldn't defend themselves. They just had to hope that the men out there were actually doing their fucking jobs instead that they were taking fucking shells so they could keep those guys alive, but they don't deserve a vote, I guess.
Well, the men in those support roles were still better than women in those support roles.
In what way? Show any fucking evidence other than the fact that you're a misogynist piece of shit.
Yeah, they're better
Other
cooks,
than the fact that
they're
you're a
better
misogynist
medics.
piece of shit, and that's just your assumption. Show me anything.
They're better cooks,
anything.
they're better medics. If I'm a nurse, right, as a man, I can carry a guy from one bed to another. Women can't do that. There's all kinds of
That's
reasons.
not how you carry a patient from one bed to the other. How many nurses do we have today in our capitalistic free
when you're
society
a combat
that are women
medic, you carry them
compared
however
to
you
men?
can, sir.
Wait, hold on. Shut the fuck up. How many women are nurses today in a normal capitalist society with hospitals compared to men? And so, by your fucking theory over here, we should have way more male nurses than female nurses, right?
No, I'm saying for the army, for the draft, that's fine. I have no problem just drafting only men into those positions, because when the shells start flying, I don't want women getting killed, because they should be at home having the babies, raising the next generation, because a bunch of their countrymen are getting slaughtered and not coming back.
So I'm glad you actually said that, because during World War II, do you fucking know anything about the women effort on the home front? The fact that they were keeping factories running, they were keeping supplies and
put a screw in a piece of metal,
and everything that those soldiers needed to survive. They were the reason why that shit fucking happened, and they were the reason why those men were able to survive on the front lines.
Were they drafted?
But yet they weren't a part of the war effort. God, you're so fucking retarded.
Did they need to be drafted to do that? To put a
they sure as fuck could be.
No, that's not answering my question, sir. Did they have to get drafted to put a fucking screw in a piece of metal?
They fucking volunteered for it because they were fucking badasses.
They volunteered for it. Gee,
yeah, because they're fucking badasses, dude. Because women are fucking badasses that went to bat and actually fucking fought for this fucking country.
Before they had the vote?
That actually fought for this fucking country, and you're sitting over here saying that they don't deserve a fucking vote because they weren't on the front lines.
All of you, please.
Sorry,
it's okay. It's okay. Okay, I'm just really curious. For the women who do volunteer in the time of war,
fuck off,
would you give them the right to vote? And this is to you, Kung Fu Joe. So in World War II, the women who did volunteer to help in the factories, to do these dangerous, hard duties, would you give them the right to vote because they volunteered and they didn't need to, right? But they volunteered, they put their lives on the line, they put their housework aside, and they wanted to go and help the war effort. Would they get the right to vote in your system?
No, they don't need the right to vote to volunteer for their country. No,
as a reward for helping.
As a reward, no. The reward is that we win, we don't lose, and more of our boys come home. That's the reward.
So can we go down the list of all the things that he has to...
I'll let you. But $2 for my listening library to say, if you don't make gun go pew, you don't vote logic. Well, thank you for the $2. And then $10 from Karen D. Hippie to say, what percentage of our army are frontline soldiers?
What total red herring.
So we have to go down the list of all the things that you have to completely ignore to continue this ideology. One, you have to ignore all historical references of what happens when an army invades another land. You've immediately dismissed that. You've dismissed women that
no.
You said that you dismissed it because it hasn't happened.
No, I said that it's not conscription. You're not listening. I said
the answer to the Super Chat's question is 10 to 15% of the total U.S. armed forces consist of frontline combat soldiers. So about 10 to 15%. Go ahead.
You have to dismiss the fact that war economies immediately shift, which means we have to pull people out of all other types of economies in order to get them into the war economy. So they should be allowed to make that choice whether or not they shift into that different economy. The other thing you have to dismiss is if you are losing or lose that war, women have to face the consequences along with men. You have to dismiss the fact that women also have to continue to try to keep a stable world going while quote unquote their men are at war, and you have to dismiss nurses, army medics, and everything else that women take because you don't understand how bedside manner works. So many different elements have to be dismissed in order for you to continue this argument that you're just basically saying man strong, man decision, woman weak, women can't.
Hold on. Yes, I want you to respond to that, but also $10 from DT Keezy to say, what has Kung Fu Joe done to deserve the right to vote? So answer both those questions. Go ahead.
So the first to what Dialogue just said is that all those things he listed can still be done without the right to vote. Like women can still do all those things.
Yeah, you have to dismiss all
so
of
it-
them to continue your idea.
No, you don't have to dismiss them. They can still exist and have existed and were, in existence and being done by women without their right to vote. So I don't know what the
Do
fuck
you
you're
not
talking
know
about.
what dismiss means?
So
What-
basically that super chat that says you don't get to vote unless you go pew pew, like
No,
you
that's
agree,
not-
you ascribe to that.
No,
Because
that's I have a
you're
criteria.
dismissing everything else.
No,
and you're
I
just
have a
saying
more
unless you're out there-
comprehensive criteria on voting. If
Right,
you
not-
would
Oh,
like
I
to,
can't wait to hear your dissertation on this.
Hold on, no.
I'm just
Yeah.
Hold on,
curious.
he gets to
as
give
a
it. He gets to give
obviously-
it for 50. If someone gives me $50, he gets to give his
There you
caste
go.
system.
$50
okay?
bucks.
That's otherwise he keeps engaging as he is. Go ahead.
Well,
Yep.
look, I'm gonna set up a spaces probably like Thursday or Friday. If you would like to join, I genuinely need to hear how you've been able to like get through life with not knowing what the word dismiss means. I just genuinely got to find that out.
I just
Because
don't know what like why is dismissing what you're saying like an argument?
Well,
Because
just to
against
be
what
clear,
I-
just before you answer that, someone did pay me $10 to ask you a question. And
Yes,
I wanted
go
to
ahead.
answer.
Go back to it.
Well, yeah, what has Kung Fu Joe done to deserve the right to vote? I'm just curious.
Oh, so I'm a husband and I have kids. I've contributed back into the birth rate of this country that we so desperately need, and I'm a tax benefit. I do not take negative taxes. I pay a shit
Every
ton
single one of
taxes.
those things your wife has done with you, right? Like
Please tell me
outside
what
being a
under-
good
under
husband, I
my
assume she's a
direction,
good
yeah.
wife, right?
Under my
She's-
direction, yes. She is a Christian woman. She follows me. I'm her leader. As the man, I am the priest of my house. Thank you very
Myron
much.
Gaines, is that you?
Okay.
Is Myron Gaines in a Christian marriage, sir?
You're
I have
not
no
in a
idea.
Christian
I don't
marriage,
know.
sir.
Oh, I'm not? Really?
No,
Okay.
no.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Not even
Oh
remotely.
man,
If you say so, bro.
what's up, Myron? No, I genuinely need to know how you got through this without finding out what dismiss means. Because dismiss
I don't know
doesn't mean
what-
that they can't do it. What dismiss means is, regardless of all these things that I mentioned that women will have to deal with, you still feel like they're not allowed to have a say in whether or not we go to war. That's what.
Why?
dismiss
No,
means.
but hold on. The debate tonight was over like whether or not misogyny is ruining relationships. So tell me, like, let's say you have a household where there is an understood hierarchy, a pecking order of things, and then the
pecker order.
government comes in.
Got 'em.
Sorry, go ahead.
The government comes in and throws a machete on the floor between the husband and wife and says, hey, whoever grabs it first has ultimate power in this household. Like you're automatically giving them division.
Well, let's bring your
Right.
wife on and talk to her. Would you be willing to do
we
that?
don't need to.
No, we don't do
come
that.
on.
sir.
If you don't mind
Come
answering.
on.
and
She's
you-
not
I mean,
allowed. I
just real
don't
quick,
allow her to
just real
talk
quick.
politics.
Yeah, that's kinda
I
what
am
I'm
just
picking up
curious,
on,
And you don't
yeah.
have to answer if you feel uncomfortable, and I apologize if you do. But does your wife know your positions on these things? Does she know that you go on-
Absolutely.
Okay. Does she ever watch
Yep.
your show? I'm just really curious.
Is she allowed out of the basement?
Yeah, she watches my debates here and there.
Oh, okay. What is
How-
her thoughts on
wait,
this?
wait.
I'm just.
So
yeah.
how far away? is
She's
your-
a Christian woman. She agrees with my worldview that, I am basically in charge. I'm the head. I am the priest of the house. And
Okay,
she
so-
follows my lead. Yeah.
So to address these weird anecdotes, how far away is your house from the Gunners Plaza in Fallout 4? Because that doesn't make sense. No one's going to throw a machete in the middle of your house and be like, "Hey guys, fight for this." That's
I just
What are
said
you
the government
talking about?
comes in, they throw a machete between us, and what I'm the allegory I'm making that to is voting, right? So before only the man was going to vote, and now the woman gets to vote. My wife has the power to vote against my interest. If we were in a secular house, that would be a bigger problem, but glory to God, we are both Christians, so that's not a division in my house. But
that's your house.
this has caused division to the, maybe more secular, less rigorously Christian households. And that's why we see all this relationship fallout, because there are gender roles, as Lactoid argued earlier. Gender roles are fine. Gender roles kept everyone happy and in line. I agree with that. He
Well,
absolutely
just
made a
absolutely.
devastating
Hold on.
argument against you.
Yeah, hold on. $5 from Aliceness to say, hey, Joe, should men take on the leadership role of raising the kids, since women need direction from men? What about birthing? Any advice?
Alicia's not a serious person.
But
but
she did
you
give
are.
me $5, and it's a serious
Okay, she gave you
$5.
five. Guess what, Alish? Okay. Read it again.
Sure.
I'll answer her stupid question.
Hey, Joe.
So she wants.
Should men take on the leadership role of raising the kids, since women need direction from the men? What about
How's that a
birthing? Any
leadership?
advice?
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. What about
Yeah.
birthing?
So
Any
first of
advice?
all, what about that is the leadership role? If my leadership says, "Hey, you raise the kids," and I also teach them valuable lessons and horseplay and stuff like that, we divide our duties as parents, and that's how it should be.
Okay. $5 from Audacity to say, come on, guys, you can't interview an imaginary friend. Thank you for the $5 from Audacity. I guess my question for you, Kung Fu Joe, right? When it comes to like this claim that people were happier back in the day in relationships, I'm curious what stats you're using to justify that. I've heard the ones that Lactoid mentioned, but as Dialogue said, they literally could not get out of these marriages in many cases. There was too many obstacles. And there were obvious huge issues that many in society had with the state of things because they worked to change those state of things. If they weren't happy with it, they would not have had things like the suffragette movement and things like that.
So this is going to I think this is going to be a longer explanation than you have time
we could
for.
save
Wick.
it for another day if
Yeah.
But I would
there's
like to have
there's
you
a lot
on.
of nuance.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a long history to this.
How about this? Next week we'll set it up and we'll have like a kind of like a Kung Fu Joe versus a world on this specifically.
Oh wow.
Sound good?
Sure. Yeah, book
Okay,
me.
let's set it up.
I'll
Set it up.
Wick, I would like to object to this. If you do that, he is definitely going to beat his wife afterwards.
Why? I don't think he will. Like, come on, we can. I don't think that he's. I'll
I'm
just ask him.
just-
Have you ever beat your wife, sir?
Oh, you're
me.
supposed to ask
Yeah.
him when did he
when
stop
did you
beating
stop
his
beating your
wife?
wife?
Thank you. Ah, homie.
No. Have you ever used not capital punishment, corporal punishment on your wife when she's done something that was harmful to the household?
I'm so tempted to make a joke here, but
Don't make a joke. Just tell us.
You could just be honest.
No.
No, you can't be honest, or
No, I'm saying the answer to the question is no.
Okay, fair enough.
oh, but do you think that you have the right to?
Excuse me?
He's
Do
asking,
you think you have
is
the
there
right
ever a
to?
situation in which you would? So, is there something that your wife could do or say or a position that she
Disobey.
could take where you would feel justified in hitting her?
I'm sure. I mean, this sounds like you can make that argument for anybody, really. Like, there's a logical, something she could
Sure,
do
like
that
what? Give
would
us
compel
examples.
that. Sure.
Well, give us a
Like if she was like holding our kid's head underwater and they were
Okay.
drowning.
No, that
yeah.
me too, right? If
Yeah.
a woman was holding my child's or someone I loved heads underwater, I'd beat the shit out of them to stop them. Yeah,
Before we
that's
go,
true. But
Well,
like, is there
yeah,
any
just to
other?
be
Before we
clear,
go-
Wick, you said something that would like interrupt the harmony of the household. Like, we're not talking about like defending a life for a life. I'm specifically asking you what the Bible says, which is if your wife disobeys you or gets out of line, you can hit them. So I'm asking, do you believe that?
Like, well, I believe it in the historical context, maybe where there was no, laws against it. I don't know. It was a different world back then. It's not the same world today. And,
So no.
as we just,
So you're saying no. You're saying no, you don't believe that that's right.
well, I think what you might be referring to is like the Old Testament. So like old Jewish law.
I'm
a
referring to
Christian,
1940 United States of America, where it was perfectly legal to do that.
I
don't know why we're like splitting hairs here. You don't need to get all philosophical.
laws?
Like,
Yeah, no, I don't
is
care.
it okay? Like, if you need to like get your wife in order, kind of like Sean Connery, and sometimes she just needs to get the back of the hand. Are you in support of that?
You guys ever see the movie The Quiet Man? Go watch it. It's a funny movie, right? Like, but that's the thing is like the wife's acting up and Like, he just basically beat the shit out of her.
But before we go, I do
Quiet man.
Before
Wow.
we go, I do want to kind of get to where this all started at, because it went into a weird place where it was about voting and everything else. But you specifically were talking about how you felt like um, her
I
having
can't
the
believe you
ability.
just gave him an out dialogue. All right, continue.
You specifically said that the government is giving a specific, I guess the metaphoric uh, hatchet in the middle of the room to separate the husband and wife. But wouldn't that hatchet not matter if in the beginning you both agreed on terms? So, for example, if two people already agreed on something and say they weren't conducive to the way that you live your life, then that hatchet wouldn't matter. It would just stay in the living room. The only place that hatchet will become a problem with is if there's two people that have completely different ideologies on how the world would work. Like, I'm pretty sure there's millions, if not billions, of women who do not want to live in a house with a man that thinks that they should not be allowed to vote. But those women would be happy with somebody that's like, yeah, you can vote too. So that's
so I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship, but eventually, no matter how much agreement you have with people, sometimes you're going to come to a point of conflict where you don't agree on things. And so in a dynamic where you disagree on something, but you have equal power, and then there's another dynamic where you disagree on something, but there's unequal power, which one is going to solve conflict faster?
It depends on what we're talking about. So, like,
oh, dude, my God, you're just so weaselly.
If there's a clash between,
I'll give you an answer.
You're just so weaselly, dude.
I'm not weaselly. I just don't have.
No, pick one or the other. Just tell me which one of the two dynamics that I just laid out is going to have less conflict, like harder time conflict resolution.
Pussy power. The ability to end wars with withholding sex. I mean, like, we've seen it.
Withholding sex. Well, hold on, buddy.
You can see if you can see it right now in Middle Eastern countries, they're giving their men's the white feather. They're like, hey, why the fuck aren't you out here fighting?
Yeah, well, I'm not a Muslim.
Women have. Well, we did like no. Hold on. Women shame the fuck out of men that were not enlisting for World War II. Those pussies had the power, son. Like you can argue that's not true, but when it comes down to the end of the day, the men are so fucking easy to manipulate. It's like, you can't have this no more.
Men.
So
that's a social norm because other men give them shit for not being brave, and that
for how long?
The
Since
women
like the literal
those
beginning
men.
of
The women
time.
like men that are giving the weak men the shit. That's why they make fun of the weak men, because they're not like the strong ones.
Well, I think ever since rape was criminal, ever since rape was considered criminal, the women had the power. It's totally. It's just the fucking reality.
The reason why this yes or no question is absolutely ridiculous.
It's not yes or no. It's choosing one side or the other. I asked you very clearly. And if you have a dichotomy where there's two people, they have a disagreement, but there's unequal power, and then you have another two people where there's equal power and they also have a disagreement, which one is going to have easier conflict resolution?
It depends on what we're talking about.
How about start by defining power?
God, dude!
Define power.
I'll give you the one where I'm in charge. So me and my wife are having a disagreement, but I'm in charge, so I have the final say. Conflict over. Now, what's going to happen in the other one where they have equal say?
What's going to happen in yours is she's going to cheat on you because she's tired of your bullshit. That's what's going to end up happening. She's going to fuck the youth pastor because she's tired of dealing with you.
You don't know what a Christian worldview is.
We are circling the drain a little bit. We are going there. I do want to give a chance to the new people to have their say, and then
I'm going to shut the fuck up.
End. Okay, we're probably going to end.
Can I please just answer the question? Like, he did ask me a question that he's refusing to let me answer.
Only if you answer it, though.
In the way that you want to answer?
The guy left. Oh my God! Of course he left. Never mind.
Okay, whatever. Thanks, Wick. I'll let the others come and ask their question.
I actually have a question for you, Joe. Is it okay, Wick, if I ask him a question? Or okay. So in pre-modern societies where you would have like the men going to war, and specifically the men being the ones going to war, oftentimes it would be the women, the children, and the elderly who are left in the village to either defend it or simply live with the consequences of the men going to war. And it wouldn't be uncommon for some group of individuals to be like, oh, okay, we know that there's no men there, we go and we slaughter them. Should those women have had a say in what the men do as far as going to war if they need the men there to protect them?
I don't understand. If the war still has to be fought, what's the difference?
Does it have to be fought?
That's what I'm
the
talking about.
That's the question.
Well, that was
like,
but yeah, but are you engaged? You're trying to build a question off of my hypothetical, but in my hypothetical, we're in an emergency war situation where men are conscribed, right?
I'm Weasley, but he's answering.
People go to war for other things, though. Like this isn't just like we currently.
Yeah, but hold on. Wait. Doughboy, you're not engaging with my specific hypothetical, which was we get attacked.
I asked the question. You're not engaging with mine. You're not engaging with mine.
What is? But just to be clear, I'll engage with your question, but it has nothing to do with my my challenge to women's voting.
Should women have the right to vote in that circumstance?
No, because the circumstances would still be the same whether they had the right to vote or not.
Why? What if they weren't, the elderly and women weren't then under threat as much by a group of raiders if they decided, hey, we don't want you to go to war, men, over some resource or something like that we don't necessarily need. We just want
that scenario could still happen if women had the vote and men primarily had to get drafted. That's still the same thing.
Could happen doesn't mean that the women would be more likely to vote for that to happen.
But I'm not sure why. You're not missing. It's already baked into your hypothetical. The same outcome could happen under the current system we have, where men and women can vote. So that's why this is a bad hypothetical.
What is the thing you're avoiding? Hang on, real quick. What is the thing that your specific refusing to allow women to vote avoids? What is the bad thing that it avoids?
It avoids illogical rationality when making important and strategic decisions.
How?
Do you think
men are more rational and logical, and women are more driven by emotion?
Sure. Kung Fu Joe, I don't think there's been any women on the show tonight so far. Would you consider the people who are who are attacking you, are some of them at least pretty illogical in how they're attacking you?
Given how easily I've been able to dismantle their arguments, yeah.
Okay, so how, again, would preventing women from voting prevent illogical votes? It doesn't follow, because none of these people
because there are more logical men like me who would outnumber illogical men like this, because if you look at men's voting, men vote overwhelmingly conservative.
Have you ever read a history book in your life? Ever? Because you're making this argument based off
what? How is that a response to what I just said?
It's also hilarious to argue that men are less emotional than women, when men are more likely to kill people out of anger than women.
Not to say
actually, women kill men for less.
For less than what?
Who kills more?
When men or women? Women kill more men when women are in positions of power.
More murder.
Less than
men or women?
Yes, women commit more murder. Yes, correct.
Okay, that's just absolutely false.
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. You can look it up. There's over 30 million men were aborted since the 1970s. That's women killing way more men. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Clearly, we're not talking about
women kill way more men when they're in positions of power.
We'll set up the show next week, but right now, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna have to end the stream. I love you all.
Thanks, Wick.
Thanks for being here. I'll see you guys tomorrow. We'll do open call-ins, and then on Thursday we will have Hutch. We'll have Ryan Getty. We'll have all sorts of people on to discuss whether or not we should be ever be illiberal to protect liberalism. We'll talk about it.
That's a great topic.
See you guys later.